The Supreme Court has denied emergency injunctive relief on the GOP lawsuit out of Pennsylvania, challenging the constitutionality of mail-in voting. And it seems like particularly bad news. However, there is still a lawsuit coming from Texas. Texas is suing 4 states. So maybe that's the one, right? Trump can still win somehow, I guess. I don't know. A lot of people are mad because they're convinced, no matter what, Trump is going to win somehow. And admittedly, I will say there's always some kind of open window. But the way I've described it is, Trump is on track for some kind of victory, but the track's got loop-de-loops. There's like trees falling on it. So yes, theoretically, if he makes it through all these obstacles, there is a way he becomes president again. But it's looking, look, let's just be real. Okay. It's looking worse and worse with every one of these lawsuits, but far be it from me. I am no legal expert and I can't tell you. So I brought on a legal expert who recently got ratioed, one of the biggest ratios in Twitter history, I think. Will Chamberlain. What up?
Yes.
Who are you, Will?
I'm Will Chamberlain. I'm the publisher of Human Events. I'm a lawyer, and I serve as senior counsel to the Internet Accountability Project and the Article 3 Project.
Yeah, try and keep it a little closer.
Okay.
That way people can hear you.
Okay.
So Will recently had a Twitter thread about, which case was it?
I've done a thread on a number of cases. Well, I did one on the Third Circuit case, which we're not talking about today.
The crazy ratio you got of...
Oh, the crazy ratio I got was just because I was frustrated with people telling me I dared say Biden was the president-elect. And they were like, you can't say that yet. It's not official. And I just want to be like...
Technically the truth. Literally
technically
true,
the truth. But please don't tell me what to say on my Twitter. So I was just mad.
That's fair.
Okay, so we have to go... We have to talk about what this means. And you're not a constitutional lawyer. You probably know better than anybody else in this room and many people on Twitter who are opining. So we'll talk about that. Because we do have the Texas lawsuit. And a lot of people are super excited. This is it. Texas, they're suing. And that's it, right?
It's more hopeful than many other challenges that have been brought. But that's still a big long shot. We can get into. We'll get
into it because we've got a ton of other stories too. This is crazy. Luke was just telling me that the FBI issued a warning saying that China is going to be targeting people on U.S. soil. It's not just that. We've got this video that was published the other day on Fox News of a Chinese professor bragging basically that Joe Biden's compromised and that the old guard is back in power, so China's going to get what they want. It's shocking stuff. And so we'll talk about this stuff. We'll talk about what's going on. Portland police recently retreated. Antifa overran them. So we'll get into it. We're hanging out with Luke Rudkowski. He's chilling here. So we have Luke and Will today. It's a
twofer.
Well, Luke's wearing his Santa hat, so it's a Christmas special.
Howdy. This was very last minute. I was just doing my grocery shopping until Tim called me here. I am the Sunsei behind wearechange.org. I appreciate sun gazing. And an interesting fact about me was that I was once arrested by then New York City Michael Bloomberg for asking him a question. How are you? Hope you're doing well.
There you go.
Yeah. And Ian's chilling over with the static orb.
Zip.
Oh, there it is.
Zip.
And of course, Lydia is producing.
Wait, where's the button? Okay, I'm over here in the corner. I got a lot of people to switch cameras from.
Yeah, we have a lot of people
guys.
on.
I'm keeping up with it.
So if you haven't already, smash the like button, subscribe, notification bell, the good stuff. We're live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. But let's just jump into the first story, and I will read what USA Today has to say. USA Today reports Supreme Court dismisses Trump allies' challenge to Pennsylvania election. The Supreme Court refused today to stop Pennsylvania from finalizing President-elect Joe Biden's victory in the state, despite allegations from allies of President Donald Trump that the expansion of mail-in voting was illegal. I like how they say allies of President Donald Trump instead of just saying like Republicans or, it's always got to be about Trump. The action by the nation's highest court, which includes 3 justices named by Trump, came as states across the country are locking in the results that will lead to next week's electoral college vote. It represented the latest in a string of stinging judicial opinions that have left the president defeated both politically and legally. By their one-sentence denial, the justices left intact a ruling by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which said the challenge to a state law passed in 2019 came far too late. New Associate Justice Amy Coney Barrett appeared to have participated in the case. No dissents or recusals were noted. Led by conservative Rep. Mike Kelly, the challengers claimed the Republican-led state legislature's expansion of absentee voting violated the Pennsylvania Constitution. Rather than going to court after its passage, however, they waited until the state figured prominently in Trump's loss to Biden last month. All right, there's a lot to go through here. First off, I gotta clarify. The lawsuit didn't have anything to do with Trump directly. It wasn't filed by Trump's people. It wasn't coming from the Trump campaign. Mike Kelly actually won his race, and it was noted by a lower court judge that they would likely win on the merits, and Mike Kelly would be negatively impacted by this in the event they do get some kind of relief. But first of all right, Will, just give me your general opinion so we can break this down and so I can better understand this. What does this mean? Are they saying that the case is done permanently, it's over, nothing's going to happen?
No, but they're saying that they've denied emergency injunctive relief, right? Basically, Parnell and Kelly, the two guys who were, they lost at the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and they want to get the Supreme Court of the United States to stop it. So they need to actually have an injunction as well before, they have hearings and argument.
What would the injunction do?
The injunction would set things in, somehow stop what's happening, right? So maybe the injunction would stop the electors from being certified. I don't know I think they might have already been certified.
I think they're already certified,
but it might have stopped them from going to the, voting in the Electoral College or something like that. I mean, an injunction is just getting the court to order somebody to stop doing something and freeze things as they are. So
what I read was, there's a couple things. First, we have the lawsuit coming out of Texas, which we'll get to in a second, because this may be bigger. I think it is absolutely bigger, in your opinion.
I mean, at this point, it's certainly bigger because...
Oh, right. We'll get to that, but... So I heard something that said basically they denied emergency injunctive relief, but part of it has to do with the fact that Texas is asking for basically the same thing anyway.
I don't really think that that's the reason they denied here. I read the briefing from the state of Pennsylvania, and it was just good briefing, and it explained there were 4 or 5 different independent procedural problems with the litigation as far as trying to get SCOTUS to do anything.
Yeah.
First off, if you're going to, SCOTUS doesn't want to consider issues for the first time. They want to see things resolved in the lower courts, and then they can sit as a court of review. The problem is it looks like that Kelly and Parnell and their lawyers didn't raise the sort of federal issue, the idea that it would be a violation of the Pennsylvania Constitution, but also that it would be a violation of the federal Constitution.
No, they did. I think they did.
But not in the lower courts, I don't think.
Right.
Right? They did that later, but they needed to raise that specific argument earlier. And because Pennsylvania never ruled on it, or nobody ever ruled on it, and Supreme Court itself would be the first people to consider that issue, they're like, whoa, we don't want to do this. And then there were the additional issues that have popped up elsewhere, standing, mootness.
Latches, is that what it's called?
Latches, right. So that's just undue delay in bringing your case.
So for those that aren't familiar, I think that's the biggest one. That's basically what they're ruling on. It basically says you have to reasonably bring your lawsuit, reasonably within a certain amount of time. You can't just sit on it forever.
Right. And so this is a common theme in a lot of the election litigation that's been ruled on so far, is that there are these big procedural problems before you even get to the substantive questions about whether or not the scheme is unconstitutional in the first place. And so I really wasn't surprised by this news because I read the brief from Pennsylvania. I'm like, oh, wow, you didn't raise the federal question in district court or in Pennsylvania at all. They're just going to not hear your case because they don't want to deal with it.
And that's really interesting because when you look at the mainstream media's coverage of this, it essentially is Trump is done. It's over. Yahoo News has an interesting headline here. They have an article that says Supreme Court shuts down Trump's campaign's last-ditch Pennsylvania appeal. So they're making it sound like
it's not even coming from the Trump campaign.
Well, that's what they're saying on Yahoo News.
So that's what I bring up here in this USA Today article. They say that what was the exact quote? They said basically that it was too late because they waited until the state figured prominently in Trump's loss. Nowhere in this does it say Trump lost, therefore, or anything having to do with Trump.
Right.
And we had Sean Parnell on, one of the plaintiffs, and he said he didn't know. He didn't know at all that it was unconstitutional. They all thought the law was constitutional, and now they're suing because they found out it wasn't.
So, there's a question about whether or not the Pennsylvania Supreme Court correctly applied their Latches doctrine, right? But the problem is, Latches is an issue of state law. It's not a federal law issue.
Right.
And then ultimately, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is the final arbiter of what Pennsylvania law is. And so that's why they have to figure out how is this possibly a federal question and get.
And they didn't
creative.
raise it initially.
Yeah, exactly. It was sort of like a last minute audible of like, oh, we actually need to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. How do we do that? And it's like it's way too late you need to have kind of anticipated this potential problem in this path at the very beginning.
Do you remember what their federal argument was? Because it's in there.
Yeah. So the federal argument goes something along the lines of because there's the electors clause in the federal Constitution. Delegates the power to run your elections in a certain way to the legislature, and then that's also sort of incorporates the lawmaking process with the Constitution, et cetera. That if the Pennsylvania courts and the Pennsylvania government is somehow violating their own procedures, then that creates a federal question because it's a violation of somehow that delegation of power.
But they didn't bring that up early.
They didn't bring it up early enough to get, at least that's probably what I think is the reason here, right? The Supreme Court didn't say why it refused to review it, just give a one-sentence denial.
Right.
But my guess is that this is the big reason.
So what you're saying is that you're a better lawyer. They should have hired you because you would have won. I'm
not
kidding.
I'm not saying
Half
any
kidding.
of that. I don't even actively practice right now. I run a conservative magazine. If you're hiring me to do your litigation right now, you're probably making a mistake. But if you want to pay my rate, that's
Did you
fine.
see the lower court's opinion on the merits?
I mean, I
they would
saw the
win?
Pennsylvania Supreme Court's opinion. It was
narrow.
Yeah, it was very narrow. I wasn't impressed by it, but that's the thing about being a Supreme Court. Like, I think there was some famous justice once who said, "We're not final because we're right," or something like, "We're right because we're final," in the sense of
Right.
like because we are the
There's
court of
nowhere
last
else to
resort,
go.
that means we're right.
So the claim was that mail-in voting violated the Constitution because it already has an absentee voting provision.
Violated the Pennsylvania Constitution.
Right. And the first judge did issue an injunction, and then when it got appealed to the Supreme Court, she issued then an opinion saying, "Here's why I did it," and they will likely win if it's ruled on the merits. But then the Supreme Court said, "Nah, you're too late. Bye-bye."
Yeah, and they didn't even consider the federal question or any of the questions about the actual substantive constitutionality of the statute, and they just kind of get away with it. I mean, in this case, it's one of those situations where, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court there's elections for I think the sitting justices. I think it's a very, very partisan court, and so it's not surprising to me that they end up in this really bad spot. And then so it's not surprising the Pennsylvania Supreme Court was really partisan and didn't handle this case fairly. And then it's not surprising they didn't get to go to SCOTUS with it because I don't feel like they were prepared for that particular avenue.
But doesn't this create a problem that, like, I mean, give me what's your opinion? Do you think it's unconstitutional what they did with mail-in voting?
Oh, I mean, and as according to the text of the Pennsylvania Constitution, yeah. I mean, the Pennsylvania Constitution says here are the rules for regulating absentee ballots, and these are the only circumstances where you can do it. And Pennsylvania didn't amend its constitution; they just passed legislation.
So are we now going to, and based on other challenges in other states, potentially have a president gets elected because of unconstitutional elections, and the rest of America has to just accept that?
I mean, this is one of the things that I think people, remember the tweet I did that got everybody angry, where I was like, Joe Biden won, he didn't win fair and square, but like, we need to get ready for that. I mean, history is full of instances where people very famous people won elections via cheating and took office, and there wasn't like some later remedy to it. We just knew they cheated. In
that case, why shouldn't Trump use any and all means to retain the presidency?
I mean, I just don't want to have a military coup, man. I really don't. I think that down that road leads all sorts of terrible things. So I think, to me, a lot of the problem here starts with the year before the election, where the Democrats are going around the country and weakening voter integrity measures all over the country.
And they should have stopped it.
And we needed to do a better job of stopping it. That's where we lost it.
Yeah, but is like regular Americans don't know. That's not their job. I'm not going to ask a plumber to understand how to file a lawsuit in advance.
Right.
So do you remember when the Trump campaign sued over ballot observers?
Yeah.
Did you see what the judge said about observation? That as long as they're in the room, then that satisfies election law?
I mean, it shouldn't, right?
That's crazy, right?
But here's the real problem. The Pennsylvania legislature agreed to all these reforms to ballot processing. They agreed
technically
to universal mail-in. They agreed to a bunch of stuff.
So, but technically, what they agreed to it. What they've said is that we didn't realize they would do a whole bunch of crazy things like the curing process and the extended deadlines, and that's what they just rolled with after the fact. I think that's part of the Texas lawsuit, which, again, we're going to get to in just a second. But what's crazy to me about the ruling from the judge on the Trump campaign is that, on the Trump campaign lawsuit, so Trump sued, his campaign sued, like Rudy Giuliani was arguing, I guess, saying that 682,000 ballots were counted without observers having meaningful access, meaning the observers are supposed to look at the ballots to make sure that what the counter is saying is correct.
Right.
But they kept them, 100 feet away so they couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
And then the judge said, how many were in the building? The Trump campaign lawyer, I think, said very famously a non-zero number of observers were in the building.
Yeah.
But they didn't have meaningful access. And then the judge basically said, well, the election code says observers have to be there. The observers were there. It doesn't specify distance. Therefore, the code's requirements were satisfied.
I mean, to me, that's somehow law and justice don't always correlate. right? Like, that sounds like the judge is looking at the law and saying, here's the rules. Well, the rules are these people need to be in the building. Doesn't anticipate any sort of.
But isn't a judge supposed to solve that problem? That's insane.
That's actually not what judges are supposed to do, right? Judges are supposed to apply the law. Right?
Well, hold on. I had a conversation with multiple lawyers about the gender issue in New York City, right?
Yeah.
So have you ever looked at the New York City human rights gender issues?
I can't say I'm super familiar with New York City in particular.
They have codified 31 genders.
Okay.
But their New York City recognizes any and all that anyone might assert.
Okay.
And they say that in all public accommodations, they must adhere to these practices. Essentially, if you use a specific name. And so I had a question about the extreme nature by which this law exists. So this is relevant. Everyone just hear me out. This makes sense. So the idea was, if I can say my name is anything and I can wear any clothes and use any pronouns, I should be able to go into a Starbucks or go to a job. I can get hired at a job and then show up wearing whatever I want and say, here's my name, say it or else, right? Mm-hmm. And they say that a willful refusal to use someone's preferred name or pronoun is a human rights violation of $250,000, which will warrant a $250,000 fine. So I talked to multiple lawyers about this, and I said, I'm going to give you an extreme hypothetical. I'm going to take the letter of the law to the extreme degree. What if I dressed up in a very, very offensive way and said that my gender was, insert racial slur gender, and that my official name was a racial slur? They said that the courts would laugh you out and say, no way, we'll never uphold that. But if the law literally says, so here's my argument. If the law says I can use any name and dress any way I want, why couldn't I go to Starbucks dressed like a giant Pac-Man and say I'm Pac gender or whatever? And I'm not trying to disparage anybody. I'm saying if the law isn't specific, couldn't it create this exploit?
I'd just be less pessimistic than the other lawyers you've talked to, right? Obviously, wouldn't guarantee that a judge would act on it or cede the law your way. But my view is, if their law is really that vaguely written, oftentimes you get results in court that people think defy common sense. So it depends. Sometimes the judge is going to do common sense anyway. Some judges are more active. Some judges are more like strictly literalist in how they read the law. It's just
the reason why I bring that up is, people could exploit this to make money, obviously. Yeah. But the idea is, when it comes to New York City and the human rights law, if a judge can determine that my gender is laughable, like, if you clearly pick something ridiculous meant to garner laughs, and the judge does, then why would any other judge not be allowed to throw out any legitimate claim about, trans human rights claims?
Sure, and that's exactly the reason why they might, why I probably would end up disagreeing with the lawyers you previously talked to.
So you could actually get a job at Starbucks, show up the next day dressed like Pac-Man and say your name's Pac-Man, and if they tell you no, get out, you can't wear that, you can challenge them.
Based on how you've characterized that law to me, yes, right.
It is really that vague. It says gender identity is self-expression.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of laws in New york City. There's also a very specific law against people's hair. So if you discriminate against someone's hair or hairstyle, you also could be fined as a business $250,000
right, yes.
for doing so.
Okay, so not to get off track. Okay. The reason I bring it up is because now I'm hearing, and again, different lawyers, different opinions, is it's the letter of the law. The judge just says, here's the letter of the law, we're done.
It depends on the judge. Like, not all judges act the same way. Some judges are more...
Do you think a judge should say the law is clearly intended to make sure you can observe the ballot reasonably? Like,
I kind of don't, actually. I think that's the kind of thing that needs to be dealt with by a legislative fix, because I generally think that the way these things should work procedurally is, judges just apply the law as written in the best reading of it, and then the legislature tweaks the law if the law is stupid.
But think about the problem that creates. It's like, we say, okay, we want observers to be able to read the votes, so we know there's scrutiny and the votes are legit. And then someone finds a loophole and just exploits and abuses it. So then we have an entire election that is essentially not the will of the people in any capacity because it was exploited.
Right. Well, then that question becomes like, okay, well, is there some other restriction or some other like law or right that's being compromised here? And maybe that comes into play to say, like, to constrain the way that the specific election code can be interpreted, right? So, but you need to be appealing to like something else. You can't just say, well, the law doesn't make any sense, so we should trust the law. Like that usually is not something lawyers look at.
Or the judge just says, I think it very clearly, the interpretation of the law is such that people can actually observe what is written on the ballot.
I mean,
not just to say, well, there's no official foot number in the law, so therefore, I mean, he quite literally said you could be sitting in the bathroom in the other room of the building, and it counts as having an observer present.
I would argue that
clearly
if
makes
they
no
can't
sense.
see it and they're not observing it, then they're not observers, and therefore there are no observers.
right. Well, but then very likely in the statute is also a definition of who counts as an observer and who doesn't, right? Like that's very common for most of these election statutes, is to have some sort of definitions portion where like the phrases and words they use, so that might constrain that sort of. That's I mean, it's good. It's creative lawyering. Don't get me wrong, but it's like that would be probably precluded by a definition.
So their official job title is observer, but they're not actually observing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the judge said, well, they're called observers, and they can be sitting in the back of the room playing on their phone, playing Candy Crush, and that counts as having an observer present.
It's bad law. Like I don't know what else to say. Like I think that pretty clearly Pennsylvania has really bad election codes that make a mockery of election integrity that need to be changed. Now, but if you're asking me like straight up, do I think that Pennsylvania judge made some sort of like was in legal error the way he interpreted the statute? Doesn't sound like it.
You're right. Yeah.
You know, sounds like he just interpreted the law and applied it.
That's crazy to me.
I mean, but you know, that's
because how could you anticipate that as a regular person? You could go through every law and make sure, okay, we're going to have I want to make sure nobody cheats, nobody plays any unethical games. How would you predict a judge is going to be like, well, you know, observers don't mean actually observing the name on the ballot. It just means being there.
I mean, I don't know. Like there was, I feel like there was in Georgia, they've lessened the restrictions. I mean, and COVID probably pushed them further away. I'm sure, you know, poll observers have been around for a pretty long time. So you'd feel like it was one of the better developed areas of law, but apparently Pennsylvania is just.
There's always something. So let me ask you, is this the end for Donald Trump?
It's not the end, but it forecloses, you know, one hopeful path. I think, you know, I think there are basically two viable paths that we're going to get.
Let's do it. Okay, Texas. From CNBC, Texas sues 4 battleground states and Supreme Court over unlawful election results in 2020 presidential race. Texas Republican Attorney General Ken Paxton on Tuesday filed a lawsuit in the U.S. Supreme Court to invalidate presidential election results in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Michigan. The lawsuit asserts that unlawful election results in those 4 states which President-elect Joe Biden won should be declared unconstitutional. The filing argues that those states used the coronavirus pandemic as an excuse to unlawfully change their election rules. Experts in election law were quick to dismiss the likelihood of the 9 Supreme Court justices taking the case. Now, I'm gonna poke your buttons a little bit and say Joe Biden is not the president-elect, but
that's fine.
But he's not, right?
Yeah, no, like technically not. I mean,
no, literally not, but technically is. In order to be literally
is this like a bugaboo of yours?
No. Well, no, because you tweeted that Joe Biden was president-elect, right?
No, I tweeted that Joe Biden won.
Okay, well, you said it earlier, so I'm just making the point to clarify for everybody what it means.
Okay.
President-elect is January 6th, when all the votes are counted and they say he will now be inaugurated, in 14 days or whatever, in 2 weeks. That's when he is president-elect officially because we go by the Electoral College. Technically, he is because everybody recognizes the projections from all the states, and thus it's going to happen anyway. So it's they consider it an inevitability, right? Okay, so let's talk about Texas.
Okay, let's talk about Texas.
All right. Is this Trump? He's guaranteed to win now. It's over. Trump won.
No. I mean, this is a very interesting thing. Like I had to learn. I read about it today because I was like, "Whoa!" I mean, this is something you remember from your common law class as like a footnote. That, by the way, when states sue each other, they go straight to the Supreme Court. But it's not something that comes up very often. I think I looked into it. There's been an average of 1 case like this every year, per year for like the last 100 years, and out of all the cases that the Supreme Court takes.
So like states routinely sue other states for what?
The point is it's not routine. Like one case like this every year happens.
Oh, wow.
Out of like 75 or 100 or 150 that the Supreme Court takes. So it happens, and it's usually designed for things like water rights,
like Wisconsin and Illinois or something.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they have the Great Lakes Coalition though, so they're all pretty much in agreement. But it would be like I remember there was Arizona suing the Great Lakes saying we deserve access to the water because it's on American soil or whatever.
And that was like the original idea behind the Supreme Court was you had to have a place where the states could resolve their disputes.
What's this lawsuit about? What are they suing over?
So they're suing and they're basically saying Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, et cetera, all didn't follow their own election laws, all made a mockery of election integrity. As a result, that injures us, the state of Texas, not just because our electors don't get to vote for president and it's canceled out by these illegitimate, unconstitutional votes, but also, even more important, from the state perspective, in terms of its own interests, the vice presidency is now changed. And, we're a state. We have a direct interest in our Senate representation and our ability to vote there. And the vice president is the president of the Senate who breaks ties.
Right.
So they're saying, like, look, we have standing to object here. There are all these problems, and you should take this. And actually, we think you, the Supreme Court, don't have any discretion. We think you have to take this case. And then going through the litany of problems that we've been talking about elsewhere.
They said that SCOTUS has to take it.
They argued that. Doesn't look like it's a majority view on the Supreme Court. It looks like it's just Alito and Thomas, although we don't know how the 3 latest justices would rule on it. That said, I am doubtful, but not like, I don't think it's a guaranteed or anything, but I'm doubtful that the Supreme Court will take this case. And it kind of gets to the heart of, what does the Supreme Court normally do? It does appeals, right? Again, it sits as a court of review. When the case comes to it in the first instance, the Supreme Court's like, well, I guess we have to have like a trial or something, right? Like we need to have evidence, we need to have witnesses. And how they actually do that is they literally just appoint basically a special master, which is like a private judge. And they're like, oh, I guess we have one of those cases we have to take. Well, here you go, private judge, go resolve it, and we'll deal with this later.
And then after everything's presented, they can rule on what.
Right. But because they're not equipped for it, they've kind of found ways to say, like, okay, how do we like not take these cases if we don't have to, right? Like we're an appeals court. We don't like to decide things in the first instance. How do we let's narrow this down as much as possible? And so the way they do it now is they say, well, can the underlying interests of this case be vindicated in another lawsuit somewhere else? Okay, and if they can't, then fine, we'll take it. But if they can with other litigants in a forum so that things go normally and percolate their way up, then we'll do that. This is one of those cases where there are other forums where the underlying interests being talked about in the lawsuit can be vindicated. There are election contest laws in all these states, which is actually one of the avenues we haven't really talked about, where I think there's a real chance of doing something and persuading a judge.
So what is that?
So for example, in Georgia, President Trump and David Schaefer, the director of Georgia Republicans, filed a formal election contests in Georgia state court under Georgia's election contest law.
When was that?
That was like 2 days ago.
Is that still going?
Yeah, that's still going. They just filed it. I think on the 5th or 6th.
But doesn't that play into safe harbor somehow? Like they've got to resolve that dispute?
I don't know how it interplays with state harbor, but I just know that like it's the first lawsuit I saw where I was like, oh, there isn't an obvious procedural problem with this, right? That's going to prevent this from getting heard,
right?
Nice.
And that's going to lead to a judge just kicking it out of court, because that's been the problem with all the lawsuits so far. Like the other side gets up and says, oh, you have no standing and mootness, and like going down the list of like problems with your lawsuit that mean we don't even get to the substance.
Or some of them are just, I don't know, the Kraken lawsuits.
I mean, the Kraken lawsuits got dismissed yesterday. I mean, one of them got dismissed from the bench, which you never see.
Like that's how bad it was, or what?
Yeah, I mean, because normally, a district judge is worried about being reversed on appeal. It's humiliating. It's your superiors telling you
Seems to happen
publicly.
all the time, though, right?
It does, but they want to avoid it because it's humiliating,
right.
right? Like they don't like being reversed. It says they got the law wrong and they didn't do their job properly, and it's a public opinion. Like imagine getting a performance review and having it be in like.
And then imagine
register.
being the Supreme Court and you're just chilling because no one's going to challenge you.
No one can do that. That's why all the judges want to be Supreme Court justices. But so they don't. So as a result, if they don't want to be reversed, they try and put all their decisions in writing and make them pretty rigorous so that they survive appeal. Literally, the guy just looked at the Kraken plaintiffs and their lawyers and was like, "You guys lose for like 4 reasons. 1, 2, 3, 4. You never could get into court. Even if you could, your claims are meritless. Go away." Like it was. I haven't seen that in a serious piece of litigation in a long time.
I mean, wasn't
bad.
the filing missing spacings between words?
Oh, there are typos all over the place.
But not typos. Like there were whole paragraphs that had no spaces.
Oh,
like between.
It was a mess. It was not proofread. And I mean,
what is this?
I mean, it's like they're. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand it, because when I was practicing law, if I did that, I would have gotten fired.
So the reason I ask is I hear a lot it's 4D chess. They're trying to lose on purpose to get to Supreme Court.
There's nothing good about losing.
Right.
You're going to go to the Supreme Court even if you win, because the other, like again, like say Sidney Powell wins her lawsuit at the district court level. You think the other side's going to be like, well, we're done here. I guess we're just leaving,
Yeah, they'd appeal and say no.
They'd appeal.
It would make it's going there no matter what.
Right, and you'd like to have like an opinion that says you were right from the lower court, at least to like give you some presumption. Like there's no strategy to losing.
When they lost, when Trump's campaign lost, and I think the Third Circuit over.
Yeah.
I was basically saying, a bunch of people were like, "That's exactly what we wanted. Thanks for ruling so quickly, so we can get to SCOTUS." And I'm like, there is a good point to be made in that if they're going to win and they're still going to SCOTUS anyway, then they want to get there as fast as possible, right?
Right.
So that makes sense, sort of. But still, you'd rather win than lose, even if that was the case.
Right, and you don't want to lose the way they lost in the Third Circuit, which was again on all these procedural problems, like things like even if you won your point, you wouldn't have enough to change the result of the election based on the claims you're making. So you have to get out of court, or
Well, that was they wanted to amend the complaint a second time or whatever.
Oh yeah, gosh, the way they went about that was so silly. They wanted to amend the complaint a second time. They weren't actually appealing the underlying substantive ruling. They were appealing the decision by the district court not to let them fix their complaint. And that's granted liberally because you want to basically
right.
The idea is everybody should have access to justice, so they shouldn't be kicked out of court in a technicality. But the Trump campaign had been there saying, we have to get this done by November 23rd. We need to do it really fast because, the election, the certification ball, we have to get it done fast. And then the district court dismisses their case and they're like, oh, well, can we fix the complaint and take another 6 weeks? And the district court's like, no.
Wow.
It's too late.
Yeah. And
So my question then is, and we'll go back to Texas and get to the heart of that lawsuit. Rudy Giuliani, is he a old crackpot well past his prime who's falling apart, or a mad freaky genius playing 4D chess who's going to pull out a tremendous victory for Trump? It's only one or the other. There's no middle ground.
Well, I mean, I don't want to be mean to Rudy Giuliani, but he's and he's doing like what many other people are doing. It's PR in the place of law. Like, I was really disappointed to see Giuliani being selected to argue the appeal. Giuliani's not an appellate lawyer. He hasn't practiced appellate law in years. He hasn't argued any appeals, as far as I know. I mean, it's possible I'm wrong about this, and he argued the appeal recently, but that's like a practice. Like, they were doing things like one of the things that in the Third Circuit case, people didn't miss this too. They appealed a temporary restraining order. That's actually wrong. You can't do that. You have to apply to the appellate court for an injunction pending appeal.
But how do you know this? They don't, and you're not even this kind of.
I didn't know this beforehand, but I read about it afterwards. Like,
shouldn't they have read it beforehand?
Yeah, exactly. This is why you would hire experienced appellate lawyers, because they don't have to wait for the judge's opinion to find out what they should have done.
So,
they know in advance.
But you're a big Trump supporter.
Yeah.
You were mentioning this before the show that we had a conversation a couple of years ago where I was like, it sounds like we agree on all of these culture war kind of issues and stuff. And then I don't know if it was you asked me or I asked you or something, like you asked me then why wasn't I supporting Trump or something.
Yeah.
And then I had some answers back in the day. I mean, back then it was like those are the Bolton stuff and the foreign policy failures and stuff. And that's kind of what, but the riots really changed things too. So now I'm like, you know what, man, everything else is kind of out the window. But so what you're saying is the best chance that Trump has right now to legitimately win as per some kind of constitutional process is martial law. Send in the troops, go in, just lock everybody up, arrest them all.
Is that really winning? I don't know. I don't want any coups. I think there's some possibility of the Texas lawsuit getting taken, and it's one virtue, if you will, is that it only has to get past this one big procedural hurdle, and then they can hear the case.
And what's that?
That's the Supreme Court deciding to grant permission for them to file the complaint.
So they haven't even filed the complaint yet.
Yeah, they've asked for permission to file it. And people are getting this wrong. They see it on the docket. They're like, oh, SCOTUS has agreed to hear it. No, SCOTUS has, when they do that, they're saying, oh, you met the proper steps to ask for permission to file this complaint. That's all we're saying. Your filing was procedurally correct so far.
And then they decide if they want to hear it or not.
Yeah, they decide if they want to hear it or not. Odds are my answer is they probably won't. But if they get past that, if the SCOTUS decides on this one little decision, they're going to overlook how they've been doing things in the past.
And is it majority rule?
Yeah, it's a 5-4 decision.
Okay.
5-4 because you don't count Roberts?
No, Roberts is a lib.
Yes, I know.
He's a total lib. But even so, I think, if I'm betting man, I'm not betting on the success of that litigation because in general, I mean, it's the problem we talked about earlier, that the interests underlying that they're trying to be vindicated there, right? Election irregularities, there's processes in the individual states to deal with it. And the Supreme Court generally hates having these original jurisdiction cases and only will take them if there's no other place it can be vindicated.
I don't know. Election betting odds has Trump up 0.7% today. Ooh. Considering the news, you'd think he'd be going down, but they still have him around 10% to win and be the next president.
That's free money. That's free money. That's what that is.
I don't know. I still wouldn't bet. I wouldn't take the bet.
I'm going to disclose something. Maybe I shouldn't. After I all this nonsense with the one stuff, I looked on PredictIt, and PredictIt was giving me they said Trump was at 13% to win, and you can make a bet on based on that. Go to PredictIt,
so PredictIt has Trump at 14.
Oh wow, that's way too high.
Yeah, but you know what it is though. It's because you can buy them and then sell them when they go up. So when it's at 10 cents, people are like, I'll buy it because some news will come out, it'll go up to 12, and then I'll sell out.
Yeah.
And then make 2 cents.
Right.
I keep telling everybody, man, there's two big plays right here. If you really think Trump's got 4D chess, and the Kraken was only was actually hiding and wasn't slain at all. You really think Trump's going to win? You bet. You got to go and you got to place those bets, right?
Yeah, that's free
I
money.
am not advocating
the
for
other
gambling,
way, right?
but
Like
no,
if you believe that 100% Trump's going to be in office in 2 months, that's absurd free money. You can make huge amounts of money.
You'd be rich. I saw one post on social media where someone claimed to have put like $20K into betting on Trump to win, and now they're panicking because it was like their life savings. But at the same time, I'll tell you this right here. You think that's true? It's free money?
Yeah, I mean.
Then why don't you bet on Biden? Right now,
did.
you can do it. You
I
did.
already did.
You bet on Biden.
Yeah, I got like $4,000 writing on Biden.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sure there's a ton of people watching right now who are like, "Ooh, I hope he loses that money."
Well, there's sort of an ethical thing. Like, I think if you make predictions like this, you should bet on them.
That's a good point.
Betting is a tax on BS.
Yeah.
Right. Like.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So
You should make a video like series like, when Luke comes out and he says something, I'll be like, okay, put the money down. You know what I mean?
Right. Like, I mean, it's a real test. Like, all the people who are saying that Trump's 100% going to be in office, why aren't they? I mean, there's huge amounts of money to be made on this bet.
I mean, you're going to
Go do
make,
it.
what is that, 86 cents on the dollar?
No, I'm not going to make that much because I'm betting on Biden. So like,
No, I'm saying like someone were to bet.
yeah,
You put down
exactly.
14 cents for Trump, you win $1.
Yeah.
So put down $14 and
Yeah.
win 100.
And I mean, the point being, like, not that I don't want Trump to win. I still do because I think it would be good for the country. But it's like, I've made public predictions that Trump will not win. And I feel like there's sort of an ethical obligation to be willing to put money on the public predictions I make.
Well, I'll tell you this. In 2018, I was like, I think the Republicans are gonna keep control, and they're gonna keep the House, maybe even gain in the House because all the culture war stuff was getting crazy. And turns out I was wrong. Actually, I was right. I was right for the first 2 days, and then about a week later, with all the mail-in ballots they started finding all over the place, then the Democrats ended up winning. So it's interesting how that happened, right?
Yeah.
So I was wrong. Then I said I thought Trump was going to win this one. I did say I'm very tepid most of the time, but I was saying for months leading up to the election, like I think Trump is going to win. That's my gut feeling, but Biden could win. Don't underestimate your opponent. So when it turns out that now the election is going Biden's way, and I'm saying Biden's got this, I'm probably wrong again. And now we're all going like, no. I've been saying over and over again ever since the 7th. It's 99.99%, for Biden. The reason I reserve that, actually earlier on I said it was like 97%.
Yeah.
This was before Trump actually filed the lawsuits, and I was like, so he has all of these ways to challenge these things. And then as he's, his campaign and other Republicans and pro-Trump individuals have been losing, I'm like, he of course still can.
Right.
But is it at a point where it's like winning the lottery 3 times in a row, or
I
just
mean,
like,
it's just really unlikely. He has to win all these election contests. The time, we're running into the time constraints where the Electoral College is going to vote. I mean, even at the beginning, I said that the odds of him prevailing after the election results came in like 5% at max.
well,
If
on,
you hit
on
the-
January 6th, the members of Congress can contest, can dispute,
Right. I mean,
and it happens apparently relatively often, never works, and never goes anywhere.
yeah. I mean, that's like what I would expect to happen here.
But isn't it true that what is it, Article 2, Section 1, or is it Section 2, Article 1 of the Constitution?
That sounds. If it's about Congress, it would be Article 1.
Constitution.
Oh no, you're right. It's about the presidential election, so it's Article 2.
That it doesn't matter what the states say. The state legislatures always decide.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that absolute authority is placed in the state legislatures, but I don't think they're going to do anything to contradict the Electoral College. I mean, the precedent there is crazy. Like, if you think about it, the idea that the state elections don't matter and that
They don't.
I mean, in like.
This is the craziest thing. So I've been reading more and more about early U.S. history, and the founding fathers didn't want direct democracy. Like we all know that,
Yeah.
and we've actually been sort of eroded in that direction for some time.
Yeah.
Like the 17th Amendment, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
The Senate, meaning making the Senate elections direct elections. Yeah.
Exactly. It used to be appointments by the state legislatures.
Right.
And so senators were, I think that system made more sense in a lot of ways. You know why?
Why?
We don't care about local elections anymore. And now our own communities fall apart and become detached and dejected.
Yeah, it's like our whole politics has been nationalized. Like, you can't run a local paper doing local politics section. That's a whole,
No one cares.
No one.
No.
Yeah.
And what's really irksome to me is when I see someone running for Congress talking about how if they get elected, they're going to do all the good things for our district. I'm like, you represent the district to the federal government. You don't clean up your district. You go to Congress and vote on national level policy.
Yeah, and here's a real interesting thing that the whole idea of representing your district, that basically went out the window with the ban of earmarks. That was the way they represented their district. They got a little money for like little pet projects. Now they don't even do that.
But the issue is, if you want your town cleaned up, you got to vote local.
Yeah.
And so before the 17th Amendment, for those unfamiliar, 17th Amendment says senators will be chosen by popular vote. Before that, the state legislatures would essentially vote. The problem was there was bribery or some kind of, just crony BS.
Yeah, no, that came out of like Teddy Roosevelt and all the good government stuff that they were doing in the early 1900s.
But think about it. If that's how the system still worked, then you'd be like, you gotta vote for, who's the PA state senator guy who's Mastriano, is that his name? Yeah, you'd be like, you gotta make sure he gets reelected because he's gonna make sure to get a good senator for us. Now it's like, I don't even know who that guy is, and I live in Pennsylvania, right? Not me personally, I'm just saying figuratively. Like, you've got people who live in PA who can't even name who's in their General Assembly. Can you name? Well,
I just moved to Maryland, but I don't know. I don't even know who
I lived in New York for 5 years. I can't name a single person.
Yeah,
I can name Ocasio-Cortez. I didn't live in her district.
Yeah,
and she's federal level. I can't speak. I don't know who the councilmen are. I don't know who I don't know any of that stuff.
Yeah.
It has been, everything's being nationalized, and it's extremely dangerous. It's not just about politics, it's about media.
Yes.
Let's say this was talked about like a decade ago, as local media was dying off because the internet was replacing everything. This maybe this plays into the culture war in a lot of ways. It used to be that your tribe was partially local. Mm-hmm. What you cared about locally might be your high school football team versus the neighboring town or whatever. But with social media, the tribes became singular, national, top level, and like very specific.
Right.
If they used to write about with this phenomenon, you could have a local politician be extremely corrupt, and there's no one to write about it because no one cares. Do I care about I don't know, the mayor of Gainesville committing some crime or whatever? No, I care about DeSantis. I don't care about the smaller town mayor or whatever, or the city councilman. It's not going to make the news. No one's really going to care. Unless it's really crazy, like, he builds a flying machine and then starts dropping mortars on people or something.
I don't know. Maybe I have to think about it, though, because part of this is youth and, living wherever you want. I wonder if, like, we would change our minds if we were, well, I guess you are a homeowner, but like if I was, like, personally a homeowner in a place and knew I was going to stay there for 20 years, I might start caring a little more about local elections.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, your general point, though, is correct about how, our politics have been nationalized, our media has been nationalized, and the concerns people have are ultimate. And also, like, I have a random thing, like, people would say to me, like, there's, and I think you might have said this, there's no way Joe Biden got 80 million some votes. Mm-hmm. Like,
I think there's a way for sure.
Right. And
people were, let's play the media game. Normies were radicalized by a psychotic Trump derangement media apparatus that sought to make money off of outrage about Trump. And it created a whirlpool that sucked in regular people who snapped and said, I just can't take it anymore. Biden, boom.
Yeah, no, I think that was exactly my thesis, right? Like, sports went away. Like, what were people even focused on over the last year?
But I think Trump got Ocean's 11. That's the way I put it. Yeah. Like, the real heist happened months ago when they were going around knocking on doors and saying vote, when they're doing ballot harvesting, when they were doing those illegal democracy in the park things in Wisconsin. There's the viral videos of the Native American women saying, like, we're going to give you money if you vote. Like, make sure you tell us you vote. One tribe actually said, send us a picture of you voting. We'll send you $20. Like, super illegal stuff.
Oh yeah, I've no doubt there were tons of shenanigans too. Like, I remember, I was in Philly on election day.
You were posting those videos.
Yeah, the video of the poll watcher.
I referenced that when we had Destiny here. He's a leftist, and he said, if these claims of like irregularity and fraud and stuff are the observers being blocked were true, then where were all the videos on election night? And I was like, well, Chamberlain was there, and he posted like a video in the morning of like an observer being kicked out.
Yeah,
it happened.
Yeah, that's weird. Like, there were so many people who, just a random side note, so many people denied that. Like, I saw fact checks that were like,
yeah,
there was BuzzFeed tried to fact check. I literally corrected her and she withdrew it, to her credit.
Yeah.
Like,
that's so
she's
weird.
Like, he wasn't, and then
they tried claiming that he was at the wrong precinct or whatever.
Right. It's like,
and then you posted the photo where it's like good in any precinct or
right,
something.
Exactly.
So
like
weird.
They were so tuned for like, oh, there's misinformation. People are going to spread misinformation. I'm like, you guys know there's actual shenanigans going on in Philly. And I don't know that there was some like massive plot to like thwart poll watching. It's more like that, what I would attribute this particular thing to was just sort of an arrogance among the poll workers in that area, that like they were kings of the castle. They dictated what happened. They didn't need to pay attention.
But they did you see the video where the guy yells, all Republican poll watchers leave now or whatever?
I didn't see that one, but
yeah. There's stuff like that. Or they're putting up boards to block the windows. Do you see what Scott Adams said about this?
What?
He said, if you are having a discussion about the potential irregularities or fraud after they barred observers and blocked windows, you're a victim of misinformation and essentially misdirection.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they said no witnesses, you can't do anything after that.
Right. Like,
so when they say, where's the evidence of fraud? I don't know. They kicked out the observers and boarded the windows up.
Right. And I'm actually for as a general rule, like the idea that if you wrongfully kick out poll watchers, then the votes go away. Right.
Yeah.
We assume you've committed fraud. The presumption is you committed fraud and you need to affirmatively prove you didn't. Right.
Yes.
Like, I mean, that's how it kind of works in the court system generally. Like, if you fail to produce something in litigation, judges will eventually issue an adverse inference instruction saying, jury, you need to assume that this was terrible evidence for them that proved that they did something horrible.
Interesting.
And that's the way I think we should look at, but we need to change the law to do this, right? But I think we should change the law about poll watchers and get people to a point where when they are instructed about working a poll and letting a poll watcher in, they're like, we better not restrict this poll watcher because the consequences of doing so are terrible. Well, that's clearly not the case in Philly.
The consequences of what we're talking about go well beyond just the election and which team won.
Right.
What people need to realize, and I've been saying this quite a bit, is that we're a nation of people. A judge could rule something that's ridiculous and dumb, and it would stand because they're the judge. And if it's a Supreme Court justice who gives a bad ruling, then what do? Right? It ends with them. People aren't computers. They're not robots. And so I was mentioning this previously, that people keep saying, here's what the safe harbor provision says, therefore we've won. And I'm like, you could get a crazy justice who's like, he just goes nuts and gives some crazy ruling. And I'm within reason, obviously, like within the confines of law, just have a weird interpretation of it. And then you get a weird ruling you didn't expect because people make the decisions, not computers. It's not a code. You know what I mean?
Right. And I mean, like, that's why, for example, the Texas lawsuit still has a chance. I wouldn't rule it out. Right. Like, there's always some human variability. There's cases where you have better odds and worse odds. Right. If you're fighting 6 different procedural arguments that a judge has to decide, oh, well, I'm just going to have to ignore the law in like 6 different core areas of our jurisprudence in order to rule for you. They're just not going to. They don't want to do that.
What are the odds you would give Trump of winning
right now?
Yes,
less than 1%.
Wow,
but more than
0.01 maybe. Like,
I mean, those are pretty. Those are still like not bad odds, to be honest.
I mean, he's not ahead in the vote counts in like 4 different states. I mean, and the problem is he has to win. One of the reasons, I'll talk about the other reason I like the Texas lawsuit. He has to win in 4 different states, or has to flip 4 different states,
or win one lawsuit from Texas.
And yeah, exactly right. Well, the lawsuit in Texas at least is elegant in the sense of a chance to just in one shot get rid of all the problems. But otherwise, he has to win independent election contests in 4 different states.
You know what it is?
Time running out.
It's like in a movie, and there's like 4 bad guys, and then like Texas comes up, and he pulls out his gun and goes bam, 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 and then just knocks them all out at once, and then on the gun and puts it away. That's Texas.
That's the hope. I'm hoping for that. I really am. I hope to lose the $4,000 I bet on Biden and be revealed to be a complete charlatan as a result.
No. I think it's annoying to me that people think you're not allowed to be wrong when you make predictions. It's like you can be wrong, whatever. Like at the time, you had made an educated guess based on the evidence laid before you, and there's a lot of variables, and there you go.
Right.
So I'll tell you this, man. Long story short, I had a buddy tell me in 2011 not to buy Bitcoin when it was at 70 cents because he said you can't do anything with it. It's hard to get. If you make this purchase now, you'll be putting a bunch of your money into something you can't get out. And then what happens in a month when everyone forgets about it? You'll have nothing. That's actually a really good argument. So I said, better not buy it. If I had spent the $5,000 on 70-cent Bitcoin, I would be very, very happy today if I did. But it would have been stupid for me to take. It was basically my life savings. And putting it in Bitcoin, I was like, this new technology, this is amazing. You're reading about this stuff. I'm really excited. And he's like, don't do it, man. You need that money now for food and rent. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
As I was telling you to do it.
A month later, this is before I met you.
No, even afterwards when Bitcoin was out there, I was like, you got to get into Bitcoin. You got to do it.
I have Bitcoin. Yeah. I've been paying attention. But anyway, here's what I'm saying. This election is not just about which team won.
Right.
It's about... At this point, I think this is maybe the most consequential election we've ever had. Mm-hmm. So here's the next story that we're going to get into. Trump tweets video of Chinese professor claiming that Beijing can swing U.S. policy because it has people at the top of America's core inner circle of power in clip that has been deleted from social media in China. Not only does this guy, Di Dongsheng, say that they have old friends, he calls it, in high positions. He says that Joe Biden's son became rich with all this international financing stuff, and who do you think helped him do it? Essentially, in saying the Bidens are compromised, but he doesn't need to say it because Tony Bobulinski already said it.
Yeah.
That Joe Biden is compromised by China, and now we have a guy in China. They're all laughing as he says he did it. This is the consequence now of losing this election.
Yeah, no, I'm really not happy about that, and I think.
But so listen. What do you do?
What do? You try and beat him, and one of the things I've been talking about has been, let's get a special counsel going, right? Like, this is what Democrats did. Let's have a special counsel for Biden and China, and if the
and the election,
yeah, let's have a second. Like, we should have 3, right? There's Durham already,
yep.
But let's have a new one for the China Burisma stuff, and let's have one for the election irregularities, and let's make the Democrats adhere. If the Democrats want, like, obviously, a Democrat attorney general can figure out a way to fire these people. There are ways.
Yeah.
But if they want to set that precedent, fine. Then we're never going to have to deal with another BS investigation from the civil service again, right? And so, I mean, I think they probably will end up doing that if we took if Barr pulled the trigger.
Was it LeBron James who came out all pro China? Was it LeBron?
That was right. Yeah.
We've been seeing more and more U.S. companies capitulate to China, authoritarian despots, communists who harvest organs from religious minorities. And they're bragging now that they've essentially got the incoming president in their back pocket.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how, like, the communist government of China ended up proving every critique of capitalism true, right? Like, you end up with, I mean, all the worst sort of rapaciousness and corruption.
They were able to go to these Harvard professors. What are the universities where they arrested all these guys?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was Harvard. Berkeley, I think, had one.
They go to the professor and say, "Hey, we'll give you $50,000 a month. Give us your secrets. Recruit for us." And they say, "You bet."
Oh man, there's
not only to them, but to U.S. soldiers, to military personnel with top secret clearances, just like that NYPD officer that was taken in, and also other governments like Israel that have sold U.S. technology to China. So this is a major issue that's going to have major implications. I want to know, who is this top American core, the inner circle of power and influence? Who are these people? I want to know. There deserves to be an investigation.
Deep state.
Well,
there you go.
Top level Wall Street.
Let's just call them the old friends. I'm going to call them the old friends from now on.
Well, he did extensively talk
friends.
about Wall Street and how Wall Street was able to contain someone like Obama that was very easy to manipulate. And then he said when Trump came in, the story wasn't so true. And then he thinks that when Biden comes in, things are going to go back to normal. What's normal? What is this normal according to Beijing and the Chinese Communist government?
The pinky ring of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
Trump wouldn't do it. This guy was like, how do we fix the Trump administration? We couldn't do it. Well, then Biden won, and everyone laughs. Everyone laughs. So, look, Sam Harris tweeted the other day, the story from the New York Times, why do so many people think the election was rigged? Mm-hmm. And Jeffrey Miller, he's another professor, responded that when there's so much anti-conservative bias in academia and institutions and the media, people just don't trust the elections, right? Mm-hmm. But it's crazy to me that we have Joe Biden, the single greatest president in American history, based on his ability. I mean, you have to imagine the amount of votes he got, 80 million, and the amount of campaigning he did, basically none. He must have been the most powerfully charismatic individual. I can only imagine when he got up on TV and he said, "Come on, man!" Every single one of these voters just like was blasted back by the pure awe of Joe Biden's charisma.
I don't know. I mean, Hillary was a really bad candidate in a lot of ways. People really didn't like Hillary Clinton, and they had really good reason not to like her. The thing about Biden, he's a goofball. He's in cognitive decline, but nobody hated him.
Right. He's not as Trump was the threat.
It's like, who loathes Joe Biden? There might be a few people.
Yeah.
Like, and maybe he's done some really loathsome things, like with China.
Scott Adams
but like
does.
Tara Reid.
Tara Reid. I mean, there are certainly scandals that are loathsome. But personality-wise, he's not like Hillary, and he's not like a lot of Democrats who are just,
Well, so let me ask you this. Let me load the question up a little bit. Joe Biden beat every non-polling bellwether metric, such as voter enthusiasm, party registration numbers, Google searches, which is a new one. There's primary vote count and support. He also won the other silly ones like cookie sales and mass. He lost.
Or you're talking about Trump won all these and Biden.
Biden beat them. So basically all of these things were against him. So whoever gets the highest enthusiasm tends to win. Whoever gets the best primary turnout tends to win. Whoever gets the most new registration tends to win. Whoever sells the most Halloween masks and most cookies. Those are the silly ones. I'm bringing them up on purpose. Joe Biden lost all of those things and still won. He lost the 3 bellwether states and 18 of 19 bellwether townships. So when you say all that, a lot of people say, look, if you came out to me and said he beat a few of these things, I'd be like, wow. You come out and you tell me that he beat every single one of them at once? Isn't that weird?
I mean, it's weird, and I think certainly there is fraud.
It's not impossible.
But it's just not impossible. And in 2020 was a different election.
It's true. It's true. What I always often say, people got to realize too, is that COVID moved everybody around. That people were moving, and the riots moved everybody around. So that could explain the states and the townships, I suppose.
But we also have to understand that who was in Biden's corner? China was in his corner. The big tech monopolies were in his corner. Hollywood was in his corner. The mainstream media was in his corner. The establishment was in his corner, and they all are working together, helping each other out. So it makes you really wonder what really happened here, especially with the latest revelations from this professor from Beijing. I mean, this is mind-blowing stuff. What he said about Hunter? And how the Hunter story was treated in the United States, it was essentially stuffed out. The American public were denied the truth about the Hunter Biden emails because of the mainstream media and big tech social monopolies, collusion, destroying it. This is what the professor said. Trump has been saying that Biden's son has some sort of global foundation. Have you noticed that? Who helped Hunter build the foundation? Got it? There are a lot of these deals inside. You need
to understand the way he said it.
Yes.
The laughing and smiling. He didn't just say, and who helped him build it? Got it? He went, and who helped him build it?
Yeah.
And everyone laughs. Got it? Uh-huh.
Right.
Our old friends, the political establishment, the elites, the old guard, the people who are in government who are helping us out. He says, I talked to our friends. They said they were trying to help, but they couldn't stop Trump. Right. Well, then Biden wins. He smiles and everyone laughs. So, look, man, I think dark times are coming. Dark winter is putting it lightly.
I mean,
that's what Biden said.
I hope that we win the Georgia Senate races really, really badly. I don't think so.
Important. Well, a lot of Republicans are disenfranchised because Trump's being kind of quiet. He's not really being bombastic. He's not really fighting, and then everything just looks like it's not going his way. So,
but Trump's not on the ticket.
Yeah,
people don't like the Republicans.
I mean, in Georgia, right? Like the Senate candidates outperformed Trump. Right.
But Loeffler was appointed.
Yeah, I mean there's not huge enthusiasm behind them, but the sort of
she didn't win a popularity contest, right?
Yeah, I mean
there's a vacancy.
She didn't win it outright, but there were overall more Republican votes in both the Senate seats. I think it's still pretty viable for us to win those Senate seats.
I agree. I'm just leaning towards, and maybe I'll be wrong again because I'm not good at predicting how people vote, I suppose, or I am, and I'm not good at predicting how fraud plays out. Mm-hmm. But if that's the case, then Democrats win.
I don't know. Look, I mean, basically, I speak to some personal experience. Like my parents are classic suburban Republicans, right? And my mom couldn't stand Trump. She just couldn't,
right?
And voted for Hillary and voted for Biden. But even she called me the other day and said, I'm really still glad Trump went to Georgia to get those Republican Senate candidates elected. Like there really is that constituency of people in certain places like Georgia that just couldn't stomach Trump, but would generally want Republicans in power.
Well, let's talk about the more severe reality of what comes next. This is from we got Yahoo News. FBI warns state, local police about China targeting people on U.S. soil. They say the FBI is warning local law enforcement agencies to beware of cooperating with a Chinese government campaign to coerce U.S. residents to return to China to face criminal charges, according to a counterintelligence bulletin obtained by Yahoo News. The bulletin comes shortly after 8 people, including a former New York Police Department officer, were indicted on charges of acting as illegal agents for Beijing. 8 people, including an NYPD officer, were... I mean, how is this not treason?
Well, he wasn't just an NYPD officer. He also held a very important security clearance because he was in the military as well.
In the U.S. military?
In the U.S. military as well. And he was spying on the Tibetan community, which was a protest community that he was going back all the way to China, giving out key information who was a part of organizing against the Chinese government.
Do you see what Mike Pompeo said earlier this year?
He said a lot of things.
He said China's infiltrated every level of government, from state, city.
That's very true.
So I feel like this guy getting up on stage in China and gloating that the Bidens are basically in the pockets of the old friends, and seeing the story about Hunter Biden. Let me just make something really, really clear. Joe Biden took Hunter Biden on an Air Force Two to China for a private equity deal. Why did Joe Biden use U.S. government resources to help his son get a $5 million forgivable interest-free loan from China and launch a billion dollar equity firm? They're in the pocket. It's
Yeah.
Beijing Biden. Bob Yalinsky, who worked with the family, gave an interview saying they're compromised. And that's it.
Yeah.
We just roll over and say we're all Chinese subjects now, second-class citizens, unless because we can't even go to China.
I mean, China poses such a difficult problem. Like I often people think like it was just obvious that we were going to win the Cold War. I mean, we had a massive espionage disadvantage of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the Soviet Union was fighting us, but they had a completely dysfunctional economic system. They couldn't put enough toilet paper on the shelves. They didn't.
Guess
make
who
sense.
can't put enough toilet paper on the shelves now?
Yeah, I mean, right. But like it took 50 years to beat that economy, and that economy was completely dysfunctional. China's economy is not dysfunctional.
No. It's
and
manipulative.
It's manipulative,
It's
and they also have the same sort of like espionage superiority over us that the Soviets had over us.
They have 4 times the people.
4 times the people. I mean, in terms of agents, like we don't have any meaningful presence there. They have. I mean, there's some great books on this about what the variety of different operations China's running here. Trying to hack lower level defense contractors because they can't hack obviously DoD,
Right.
but they try and get low level contractors and get plans that way. Basically trying to recruit people. I mean, I think something that somebody said to me, or I think I might have read it. There are like serious technical computer science programs at College Park taught by Chinese professors to Chinese students in Chinese, and
That's weird.
like and then those kids go back.
Dude, they're manipulating their real estate market in China
Yeah.
to create this like a regular middle class house is like $1 million compared to an American, which is 200 to 300,000 or something like that. They're buying up large swaths of land in countries all over the world, in Brazil, in Africa, in the U.S. on the west coast. They're buying up tons and tons of property. They're just slowly buying their way to take everything over.
Yeah.
It's clever. It's basically they've convinced the United States to give up all its manufacturing in exchange for cheap labor. These politicians we've had over the past several decades, the old friends, as Di Dongcheng says, have thought to themselves, look, it's good for the American business to have $1 an hour Chinese laborers I've got to pay benefits to. They save money and we all get rich. And then a generation goes by, decade goes by. And now we no longer make our own medicine. We don't you buy a musical instrument, you buy computers, cameras, whatever. It's all made somewhere else. We don't make it anymore.
Yeah.
What would happen if China declared war right now? We'd be caught with our pants down.
I mean, they wouldn't. I mean, there's still the mutual assured destruction worries, but I mean, we're beyond the point of being able to, really meaningfully coerce them. Like that's actually different from like where we were as a superpower even 20 years ago. And that's sort of, we at Human Events, I mean, we ran an article like Xi Jinping will have his way in Hong Kong, and that was like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We got a lot of flack from that from people who were saying,
You were
whoa,
right.
whoa. But like, again, a descriptive versus a narrative argument. Do I want Xi Jinping to have his way with Hong Kong? No. Will
Right.
he? Yes.
Exactly.
This Beijing professor confirmed everything that we've been hearing about for a very long
We
time.
were talking about this 2 days ago before
yeah,
the
2
video
days
came
ago,
out.
we were breaking everything down, and we got to understand we're in a trade war. We're going to be in a currency war. We're probably, according to the Thucydides trap, might be even in a hot war. And we have to understand, China has its hands deep in American institutions like we can't even imagine. When we look at politicians and corporations, they have been enriched more than they could have even imagined because of this opening of China policy that has been instituted by individuals like Henry Kissinger under the Nixon administration that literally went to China with David Rockefeller and said, hey, we're going to have a lot of jobs for you. We're going to bring you a lot of factories. We're going to bring you a lot of industry. You just give us the cheap Chinese slave labor, and then we're going to have a great deal, and everything's going to go through China. And that's exactly what's happening right now.
Look, it's beyond just the schools where they have the 1,000 Talents Project, where they've actually got a bunch of professors taking $50K a month or whatever, recruiting more people and selling our secrets. They've got Hollywood bending the knee, doing movies where they remove negative things that could offend China. The NBA is praising them. And they got TikTok.
And mainstream media as well. Mainstream news articles refuse many times to even criticize China or the Uyghur Muslims. I mean, look at Tibet as an example. A few years ago, everyone was talking about Tibet and the Tibetans and the things that they're going through with the Chinese government. Now, no one's even talking about Tibet. No one's talking about the Uyghur Muslims. No one's talking about the Hong Kong, where we're getting video footage right now of them sending activists and protesters to mainland China to never be seen again.
Or the video footage of the Uyghur Muslims being loaded into trains, heads shaven. All that's happening, and it sounds like if Trump isn't the president in the next 4 years, we will just be subjects of China.
I mean, I don't think we'll be subjects of China. I think that we're
I
still too
mean
strong.
figuratively.
But like, it'll get to the point where
literally.
whatever soft power we had, I mean, like, it will be gone, right? Like, we'll ask somebody.
We're a generation or two out.
You know,
you see what TikTok is doing. People don't realize this with how TikTok works. You know what? I'm going to stop and talk about a different social media app, okay, that's similar. And what they do is, and I've mentioned this before, in order to get a bunch of young people using your social media app so you can manipulate them and control what they see and what they think, you get some kids to use it, you give them fake followers. All of a sudden, some high school kids, like, I got 2,000 followers on this app. Like, I don't have any followers on Facebook or Twitter. They use the app more. They get more followers. The followers aren't real. They brag to their friends. You got how many followers do you have? 50? I got 4,000 on TikTok, or I should say a different app, not TikTok. No, I mean literally a different app. Because I don't know if TikTok did this, but I know there's another company that did this, and it worked out very, 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 very well for them. You get all these young people to use it, and eventually you've created a cultural wave that everybody wants to be on it because they want to get recognition, they want the followers, they want the points, they want the score. Then you use the algorithm to control what they can see and what they can't see. All of a sudden now, anything negative about China is gone. Everything positive about China is coming back. Donald Trump is the orange man. He's awful. He's evil. He's bad. Everybody hates him, right? You better go vote. Then you get a big surge of young people who go out and vote. And that's manipulated through this technology coming from these other countries. It's fifth generational warfare.
Well, I mean, there's a reason China doesn't let its citizens use Twitter.
Exactly.
Right?
But they use it on our for us.
Yeah, like, I mean, there needs to be reciprocity there or nothing at all, right? Like, and we should be, I mean, it's ridiculous that it took so long, or that people were even pushing back against the problem of China owning TikTok.
And they're aggressively going after VPNs, so people in China can't even, change their addresses to see what people in the world are saying. So just imagine living in China where your social credit score relies on what you regurgitate, what you read. If you read something you're not supposed to read, your social credit score goes down. And this is a society that other places like Singapore and other governments are even thinking about adapting themselves, because this is a great way to control people, to subjugate people, and to benefit the special interest class, which are seeing these things. They're saying, wait, this could be probably good here. And then we have a Biden administration where his cabinet is being filled with individuals that are literally arguing, we can't do anything to stifle. We shouldn't stop China, because if we do, that's going to hurt the global economy. We need to let China rise. And these are key individuals that are going to be in Biden's administration very soon.
Just lay down. And put your hands up and expose your soft underbelly for China.
That's why
they just want to lock up the Uyghur Muslims.
We need satellite internet. We need to bypass ISPs and get this free software mesh network in place. We need it here so we don't get censored, but they need it.
Yeah, I mean, a free and open internet is something critically important. And when you see China controlling it, controlling what their people can and cannot listen to and see, this is a huge, vast power that it just started out with saying, with the government coming out saying, no, we're going to tell you what you should listen to. We know what's best for you. Just like corporations are making the argument here, we have to fight against fake news and everything that's wrong in our society. We're going to curate everything for you and provide it to you on a silver platter.
I think we're on track to, based on everything we're seeing happening right now, when I say that we'll be subjects of China, I don't mean in a year. I mean in 50 or 100. We will be a weak, old regional power, probably fractured in many ways with a disparate, broken government. In some, I imagine at that point, and again, a lot of variables from now in between the 50 or 100 years, but China's got the power. China's growing. China's controlling us, and we're losing.
I don't know. I would say I'm that as pessimistic as you are, but I definitely think that we're in general. I mean, the Democrats are. Continued Democratic control will lead to that, sure.
Look at the past several decades of what the U.S. has been doing, sending our manufacturing overseas, Trans-Pacific Partnership. Mm-hmm. Now, Joe Biden's going to jump in whatever Pacific Partnership agreement there's going to be. And it's not just about China. They're the biggest threat the U.S. has right now, but it's also about the U.S. just giving up. Mm-hmm. And it's not like the collective spirit of America has said, oh, I failed, I'm done. It's that we've got politicians that never cared about us, and it's partly our fault. When people go in and they say, I'm going to vote Democrat, I'm voting Republican, they don't know who they're voting for. They end up voting for people who are just like, vote for me and, I'll fight for you. I'll give you whatever you want. And then all they really wanted was the keys to the castle. They want to get the paycheck. They want to get the pension. And they want to get their name etched in stone for history. And then they did nothing. And then when it came to passing bills, they said, how much money can we make in the short term if we send our manufacturing to, to Mexico, to Indonesia, to Vietnam or China? We'll make a ton of money in the short term. What about the long term? Oh, we'll lose. Yeah, but we won't care about that. That's our kids, right? Politicians have sold out the next generations. And so surprised to me, you've got so many young people who are becoming socialists. That seems to me like the downward trajectory is we had a period where a bunch of our leaders were selling out our manufacturing base for a short-term gain with a long-term loss. And then we created this world where these kids are like, well, just go to college then, right? Mm-hmm. That's the solution. There's no more good manufacturing jobs. Go to college and you'll get a good paying job. But what happens when everybody has a degree in some field or another and you're competing with people on the same level once again? There are still no jobs. There can be a million good computer jobs, but if 50 million kids are coming out of college with computer degrees, there's still no jobs. Now they're saying nothing works, we need communism. But communism doesn't produce anything, it extracts things. So over a long enough period of time, as everyone keeps demanding the government pay my bills, we need a stimulus, lock everything down, have the government pay for it. The government can print money. Money can facilitate trade, but if there's nothing being produced, there's nothing to trade in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's right. All right, I need to quickly use the restroom if that's
Yeah, do it to it.
I just did that.
I would say all the jobs are definitely in China, with the Uyghur Muslims producing a lot of the corporate American goods that lecture us on racism here in the United States, which is something that people need to realize as well. But I don't know if we want to go into the next story, but I mean, they infiltrate not only these kind of intellectual institutions that kind of set our young children to be where they are right now. China has a huge influence on the universities and colleges, but they also infiltrate politicians in more ways than one, as we found out today with the Chinese spy that
that's right.
slept
Oh, yeah.
with
Swalwell.
Oh, no.
Swalwell has the nerve to say cheat an election
Yes.
when he had a fundraiser organized by a Chinese spy.
Yes, and there's accusations by Donald Trump Jr. that allegedly this spy had relations with Mr. Eric Swalwell, which, by the way, Eric Swalwell was one of the biggest proponents of Russian collusion. If you remember, he was out there on all the media networks. They loved him. He was ranting and raving. There's a foreign government infiltrating our government.
Yep.
There's a foreign government controlling everything.
Luke,
the Russians
he
are
farted.
colluding.
He farted,
and he
on,
farted
on TV while accusing
very
Trump
awkwardly.
of trying to cheat an election.
Exactly. And at
it
the same
away.
time, he was being infiltrated at very high
foreign
levels
government.
by a Chinese government, which he had very close dealings with.
projecting.
Now, this person's very interesting because they are describing her as a honeypot. She slept with many prominent government officials, and she escaped to China as soon as the FBI came looking for her. They saw that she somehow miraculously escaped, which is absolutely mind-boggling.
So the Biden family's compromised. Dianne Feinstein had a Chinese spy working for her office, and now Swalwell and many other people had a spy working for him. Secretary Pompeo said that Chinese governments infiltrated every level of government.
Not just infiltrated. I mean, this spy was deemed an important political figure in California. She was orchestrating a lot of the campaigns, a lot of the fundraisers.
Fundraising for Swalwell.
Exactly. So there's individuals right now saying Swalwell needs to resign immediately since he's been infiltrated. The mainstream media right now is slowly patting him on the back, saying it's okay, he's a victim here.
He was given a briefing by the FBI. They didn't do that for Trump.
Yep.
When Trump was accused of Russia, they just started spying on him.
The FBI called him and notified him that he was infiltrated by the Chinese government. And we still don't know exactly what this person has. We don't know what information they were able to gather. This person also did fundraisers for Tulsi Gabbard, of all people.
Wow.
Yes.
No way.
So this is a major big story that's going to have a lot of ramifications, because when you look at the Beijing professor, he also talked about a political figure that helped him out tremendously that now has Chinese citizens and now is back in China. So we saw this Beijing professor literally talk about this, gloating about this, acting very happy that this happened, and now we have this story that just came out there. And I think this probably happened a couple weeks ago, maybe even a couple months ago, and now we're just finding out about it because there's a correlation with it.
You're just making me more pessimistic about the whole China thing.
Well, I mean, I'd rather know the truth and reality that we're facing than be blind to exactly what's going on, because
Luke,
we have to
listen.
understand our institutions are corrupted to the core, and they need to be replaced immediately.
Listen. If you just praise the glory that is the Chinese Communist Party, then you'll get to be a wealthy party member. You'll have a nice loft atop the tallest building.
I wouldn't
just
feel
say
right,
it.
imprisoning
Just
the
give in.
Uyghurs. I wouldn't feel right imprisoning the poor
What
Hong
if
Kong
it's
people.
you? Would you rather go to the gulag yourself? All you have to do is give in. Just give in.
No, thank you. No, never.
That's what's happening, though. It's the way people feel. It's a path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Why bother fighting against this machine that is gaining strength and taking over when you can just give in and be rich, right?
I mean, that's how they won over the elites. So.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about the spying program that was
same
revealed today with the Chinese honeypot that
Yes.
infiltrated more ways than one a lot of U.S. government officials. What do you think about that? Because a lot of people are saying this is room for Swalwell to resign. Swalwell
Or
needs to
reason for
resign.
us to
Do you think that's legitimate? Do you think there's any legal merit in that?
I mean, there's not a legal. It's not a legal argument. It's a political argument. I think he should resign. I think this should be looked at like,
I think he should have resigned a long time ago.
Like you
when he
you were
farted on
compromised
TV.
by a Russian spy in the middle of the Cold War. Yeah, time for you to resign.
Yep.
Like I'm in general think a lot more people in our government should be resigning.
I think they should all resign.
Right,
to be
like-
honest.
And term limits.
Except for Rand
and
Paul.
retiring from public life. Like, why hasn't Bill Kristol retired from public life?
Seriously.
Or Henry Kissinger, of all people.
Well, he
Yeah.
got fired by Trump.
Yeah, he's gonna
His
retire.
organization did.
I mean,
Doesn't
he's
it-
90. Doesn't he have grandchildren? He can hang out with them. It's fine.
Yeah.
Doesn't it seem like Trump is? I'll say this in my opinion. Trump is doing everything he's doing. He's acting as though he's not going anywhere.
I mean, I think that's it. I think it's a front. Honestly, I think he'll, remember the dude was a billionaire and he gave up the life of a billionaire and he'll be returning to the life of a billionaire for the most part.
Yeah, but I don't know. The TDS individuals are going to go after him, like the state level.
Right. The state prosecutors.
There's a bunch of them. They're nuts. Like
But-
we're like that's why I'm saying, man. I can't imagine everything just goes back to normal the way some of these people, like these Democrat voters, think is going to happen, because
Yeah, they're like the calls for unity. Like, I'm sorry, like you don't get to call us Nazis one day and then suddenly have me turn around and sing "Kumbaya" with you.
but they think it's going to calm down when you've literally got Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell, for instance, saying don't vote Republican.
Oh my gosh! I mean, that said, like, and there's stuff like I'm seeing like calls for martial law, and like I'm not for any of that. Like, in that respect, I'm just like, count me out. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be
Well,
like,
we got to be honest here. If the Republicans were accused of stealing the election, I think half of America would be burned down by now.
oh
Yep.
yeah, sure, right, like
Yep.
that. I mean, but that's also like the consequence of that. Like, if what you're calling for is like martial law and a
Yes.
revote, and if you actually prevailed, then half of America would be burned down.
If Trump succeeds in his efforts and becomes president, yeah, it's going to be Antifa times 10 times 100.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I mean, that's not independently a reason, right? The question is, like, the reason I oppose that is not like, oh well, Antifa is bad and they'll do bad things. It's not, we shouldn't let that control our behavior and decision making. But that doesn't mean I want to live in a country with coups. Sort of.
What do you look, if Trump on January 21st is a regular guy again, the New York's going after him like crazy, and the media smears and lies about him. It's intense.
I don't know. I mean, it's just you remember everybody hated Nixon and then they stopped and they forgot after the Ford pardon. I could even see a Biden pardon of Trump, honestly.
But that's federal level. What about the state? The state level is the
they
issue.
can't pardon the state level, but I think the sort of urgency and onus to keep going after Trump is gone if he's not president anymore. I think
Perhaps.
that's my. I mean, I might be wrong, but
I don't think so though, because I think they need their boogeyman. They need their villain. And you know what the articles that are coming out right now from the left say? In order for us to heal, Trump must go to prison.
yeah, no.
A lot of hot takes coming from the left on that
Well,
one.
they've been calling for things like truth and reconciliation commissions, right?
Tribunals.
Tribunals, like
So-
as though
listen.
he's like Hideki Tojo or something.
I'll say a couple things. You want to you by all means call out the people saying we need martial law, right?
Yeah.
The Democrats have already implemented it in many states.
Over COVID restrictions.
Right. And then you add that to the fact now they're saying tribunals for not just Trump, but his enablers. And some people have gone so far as they put a list of their supporters. So that would be you, me, or even Luke, even though Luke's not a Trump supporter. It doesn't
Right.
matter. You've called out China. You've been critical of the left. Therefore, it's good enough for them. Ian, who's actually kind of a hippie dude, they'd say, doesn't matter. He's on the Timcast IRL show. Put him on the list of enablers and supporters. So if we're at the point where we already have martial law locked down in many places and states that's violating the Constitution, they're calling for truth and reconciliation commissions, tribunals, and things like that. And then on the other side, they're calling for martial law. Like, how does this go down?
I mean, I don't know how it resolves. I think, my hope is
Collapse?
that. Yeah,
I'm not saying hope. I'm saying like the resolve. Like,
right, like
resolution
if you're
is to
making
collapse.
predictions, I don't know. I mean, I think, and there's a lot of other, the COVID reorientation of wealth to the big companies versus people.
People having nothing left are going to snap. Like that viral video of the Pineapple Hill woman, where she's got this outdoor seating area that Newsom's like, you can't use it, and then right next to it is Hollywood food production services, totally fine. Regular people are looking at that, and their brains are going to explode.
Yeah, and I wonder if the consequences for that are finally going to be felt in a world where Trump isn't around. Like, I mean, he does have this effect of like sucking all the air out of the room, and that in terms of media coverage. I mean, the thing about it is really deeply offensive that these politicians can't adhere to their own guidelines.
Yeah.
And they don't want to.
It's also important to note that we saw record levels of protest under the Obama administration when he first came in. We saw Occupy Wall Street. So that's also another factor to really consider here. And also that a big swath of the left is not really impressed with Biden at all. But I was going to ask you, how do you see this unfolding in the worst case scenario, and how you see it unfolding in the best case scenario?
I mean, worst case, you get, I mean, I guess like Democrats are going to be in control of the federal government, and Republicans generally don't do like full scale rebellion, right?
And they don't do cultural institutions.
And they don't do cultural institutions, but they also don't do like Antifa type stuff in general. Like there isn't, you don't see the sort of burning down of the cities, and
But
so
how would you? Let me know your thoughts on this. I think we might see, Joe Biden, for instance, he wants to ban all online sales of guns and accessories and ammo and things like that. He wants to do what you
bullet registration and a $200 tax on
NFA, every gun NFA
and any
What is it? National Firearms Act? Is that what it is? Or
yes.
Well,
So-
that's why we need to make sure we don't lose the damn Senate.
Well,
Right.
so what happens then if he does this? If the Senate does this? If they pack the courts? I wouldn't be surprised if a bunch of jurisdictions, small towns, all of a sudden had right-wing militias putting up checkpoints.
Sure. I mean, I think that would be a point where you'd actually see the sort of rebellions that real serious anti-government activity that was sort of hinted at in the 90s under Clinton, but that might become like a really big thing.
And that's why we had the what was it? What were the two? You had Waco.
Ruby Ridge.
Ruby Ridge.
Yeah, but I think, my guess is that's ultimately going to be just talk. I don't think Biden's going to sign new gun legislation. I think that, Democrats.
You don't think they'll pack the Supreme Court?
I think if they had the power, they would do it. And I think the big problem there is I don't know if Biden will do stuff at the federal level, but what I expect will be in a world where the court is packed, DC versus Heller gets overturned.
What is that one?
That's the court decision that establishes that the right to bear arms is an individual right and not a collective one. So
the collective right would be like, if there's a militia, then you're allowed to be in the militia with guns.
Exactly. And it's scary that decision's even close. Like that, that it requires real bastardization of the grammar of the Second Amendment.
Well, have you read the original Second Amendment?
Oh, the one that says
When
that
it
we
was-
can do whatever we want with guns. It's like that Parks and Rec.
Well-
Ron Swanson. Like this is
When
my
they were initially proposing the Bill of Rights, there were like 17 articles that were proposed.
Mm-hmm.
The original Second Amendment said something to the effect of, if someone chooses not to join active duty militia or military, they will still have the right to bear arms. Mm-hmm. And they took that language out, I guess, because there was a concern about it could potentially mean you could avoid conscription.
Mm-hmm.
So initially they were like, you can bear, a well-regulated militia being necessary to, for a free state, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. And if an individual chooses not to join or be part of a militia, they shall still have the right to bear arms. And they were like, wait, get rid of that part because it makes it sound like you can avoid conscription. And we need conscription. Because at the time, if you were an able-bodied male, it's like, you're going to war, buddy. So they get rid of it. Now we have these arguments, which I think are completely in bad faith. If you actually look at the history of the Second Amendment, we had privateers, we had corsairs. Like a regular dude's like, here's my battleship I can use to blow up a French, trade vessel. Regular citizens had cannons on their houses and properties and things like that, so they could. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, you can't have any of that. And that's the argument. But anyway.
Also defund the police because the police are bad and really just like let yourself be at the mercy of people who would do violence to you.
That's why I think what we're talking about is fifth generational warfare. Disarm the people and disarm their local police. Why would you do that? Let me tell you this. In these West Coast places where they're very prominently doing this, Portland, Seattle, places in California, it's already hard enough to get a gun in California. Now you've got defund the police. What do you think would happen if you had Northern California, nobody's armed? Well, Northern California is fairly Republican, so people probably have long guns. But let's say you have a city. Very few people have guns, and the police are now defunded and fractured. Anybody can walk right in. Just
Dystopia. I'm from California. I would never move back.
Yeah.
And it's sad to see what's happened to the state.
I think if, they get the Senate, and I do think they'll get it. I do. Because Trump's not on the ticket. Look at 2018. They didn't have with Trump supporters are not Republicans for the most part.
Yeah, but Stacey Abrams lost in 2016. She lost to Brian Kemp.
In 16?
Yeah. Sorry, in 18.
18. That's true.
And Like I still am Georgia's a red state in general. I think it just had a particular coalition, sort of like Utah. If like Utah were a closer state, Utah was, very Mormon and had a big chunk of, Trump underperformed the normal Republican performance in that state. So I think Georgia's kind of similar in that respect, where you've got, that big suburban Atlanta population.
Since you're a betting man, what odds would you give on Georgia going Republican?
Going Republican, I'd say, 70% chance, 75% chance.
Wow.
I think that's what the betting odds are right now. It's like 70 something.
Sounds about right to me, right? Like, when the funny thing is I didn't bet on the election before the election because I thought the odds were about right. I think Trump was about a 2-1 dog or something like that, and I thought that was right.
I have to say, either way, it doesn't look good because if, the Senate is by a majority of the Republicans, how much dirt do the Chinese have, especially with their honeypots, on one politician to persuade him or to push him and to do whatever they want?
And they've been doing some crazy stuff. They decided, I still don't understand this and why they would even consider it. They did the Mike Lee's immigration bill where he wanted to remove country caps. Like, guys, you get a grip. We're trying to win the Senate here, and you're out there, you're pushing liberalized immigration policy when there's a republic.
That's why I don't even think the Republicans are going to do enough to defend the country.
I don't expect much out of them. I just expect them not to do things that are, disastrous and catastrophic. Because the way I look at it is Democrats want to completely remove the ability for Republicans to win elections. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've read the book, It's Time to Fight Dirty. I might have recommended it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But basically, what do they want to do? Why do they want to do it? Pack the Supreme Court, add more states so that they can control the Senate permanently.
That's how it goes.
National automatic voter registration, voting day a holiday. They want to completely
universal mail-in voting.
Universal.
And
mail-in
the argument
voting.
is we want to make we want to make it easier for people to vote, and that's just not true.
Yeah.
They're trying to strip away election security. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, and but the end goal here is permanent Democratic control. And they thought they almost had it. They thought they were going to get it. One of the and that's actually one of the arguments why I don't think the whole thing was rigged, in terms of the voting machines are rigged. Well, if the voting machines were rigged, why didn't they just get a result in line with polling? Democrats underperformed public polling in the run up to the election. They could have
yeah, the polling was nuts though. It was insane.
But
you can look, if you want to play, it's easily explained in terms of the Trump supporter more conspiracy mindset. The polls were propaganda to demoralize voters, saying Trump's going to win, don't bother.
Sure, I agree.
Then when it came to actually, as Trump has said, this is their opinion, that he ended up winning so well that they panicked and had to really go crazy on, cranking out the fake votes.
Just so story, everything.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. There is an explanation. The left is saying right now, if Biden cheated, then how come the Democrats lost down ballot? Well, because there's a bunch of undervotes, votes that were just for Biden.
Right. I think there's plenty of cheating on the fringe, right? I still think that, I watched poll watchers get denied entry. I watched how frivolous, the behavior of these Democratic poll workers was. And I'm like, these people could have, there's no moral thing that would have stopped these people from doing some amount of cheating if they could get away with it. The question is just what could they get away with? And I think, you end up getting away with things like coerced absentee votes, duplicate votes, and then maybe some.
Well, they were in Philly. They were putting up those signs saying, "Here's who you should vote for."
Yeah, that's
super
of.
Illegal.
It's the weird, it's like the cheating on the margins or fraud on the margins versus fraud at the core. And I think that I haven't seen any good evidence of fraud at the core. I don't think there's proof of the Dominion allegations. But there's
that's so wait. You know what really bothered me about the Dominion stuff is that I even said this on the show. I got really mad about it because the Dominion stuff and Hammer and Scorecard was a red herring. It was here's what happens. There will be some dirty politician and they'll get caught doing something illegal, and when someone starts sniffing too close, what they'll do is they'll throw out some crazy idea to throw them off the trail. And then instead of saying, I caught this dude doing drugs, it turns into crazy pizza cult in D.C. And now the real crime is they're laughing, saying, we tricked those people. How easy. So right now, when you've got actual irregularity and impropriety, Trump's suing and trying to be legitimized in his claims. The single worst thing for Donald Trump in all of this was the lawsuit from Sidney Powell and the Dominion claims. Because what Trump needed, and that's why a lot of people, it's funny, they're claiming that Sidney Powell's a Democrat and Linwood's a Democrat, and they're trying to subvert Trump. I tell you, man, I was reading a post on Reddit, and they said when it comes to a coup, the one thing a leader and the person staging the coup need is legitimacy. The current leader needs to tell everyone, I'm in charge, I will always be in charge, listen to what I have to say, so that the lower individuals, the police, the law enforcement, military, listen. What the other guy needs in the coup is legitimacy in the same regard. Here's why I'm actually in charge. Listen to me. Trump comes out and says 682,000 votes. No one was able to observe. What's going on here? Matthew Brainerd's Voter Integrity Project. Look at all of these votes from people who live in different states and voted twice. That's legitimate. Then all of a sudden, Sidney Powell comes out with this typo-laden Kraken lawsuit that sounds crazy, that has, it's almost impossible to back up except for a bunch of YouTube videos and a bunch of weird videos popping up. And Trump loses that legitimacy. The media jumped on that in 2 seconds and tried making every claim from the Trump campaign about the fringest and craziest conspiracy to delegitimize his claim that he actually won. And it worked.
Yep. Yeah, no, those lawsuits are a disaster. They were, and I had people in my mentions constantly, who knows if they're real or not, honestly, but like people in my mentions being like, how dare you say that this won't work? And it's just like, because I'm a lawyer and I can
These people
read a
are real.
brief.
The people are real. I know people in my life. I've talked to people who are adamantly convinced the Dominion stuff is real. I'll tell you what, maybe, sure. But listen.
It's voter suppression too for the Georgia thing. Not sorry to interrupt, but
right.
Like you're suppressing your own voters when you tell them that the election is completely rigged.
And you see what happened with Ronna McDaniel when the lady was asking her, like, why should we even bother voting? It's rigged. And she's like, no, you have to vote. Then you see Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood. Not only did they delegitimize Trump's claims strongly, not completely, they're also now telling people not to vote for the Republicans.
I mean, it's just, this is the suicide caucus, like the sort of, we should just commit electoral suicide because we didn't get exactly
maybe they're
what we wanted.
accelerationists.
Maybe they are.
They think, look, the Democrats take everything over. The sooner here's the problem. Frogs boiling in a pot eventually just boil. But you throw boiling water at a frog and the frog's going to jump and run away. Maybe that's what the accelerationists think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, maybe that's there's some big giant strategy, but really I think it's just a giant PR exercise from people who've gotten high on their own supply of PR.
But what about Trump? You think Trump's trying to win though?
I mean, I think he's trying to win. I think he's, he's been a businessman for a long time. He's a guy who's litigated a bunch of cases to the end, so he's probably just like, he's doing what he does. He's like any other businessman. He'll litigate hard as long as he can until his appeals are exhausted, and then he'll comply. That's what I think.
All right, let's do this. We would normally now jump to Super Chats, but I want to do one more segment because I've been sitting on the story, and it's like a week old now, but I really want to talk about it. It has very little to do with politics and everything to do with just the absurdity of the modern political world. Ladies and gentlemen, Vanderbilt players were crying during Sarah Fuller's 30-yard kick. This is an actual news story. Let me break it down for you. Sarah Fuller is the first woman to play in, Power 5, I think it's called? Mm-hmm. I'm not a big football fan, so I don't know a whole lot about what this means. Changing the game. Sarah Fuller became the first woman to play in a Power 5 college football game. The team she's on, Vanderbilt, lost 41-0. She came out in the second half and she kicked like between 20 and 30 yards. And then they ended up losing. I tweeted about this and I didn't say anything negative because I was like, history was made. The first woman to play in a Power 5 game loses 41-0. She kicked 30 yards. And people were trying to convince me, like say to me, it was a squib kick. It was on purpose, right? Then we got more news. This is the craziest thing. Vanderbilt players consider opting out of final game at Georgia, another kicker joining team. After this fiasco, players actually said that they wouldn't play in another game. They were not going to do it. Seems like, I don't know if this team thought, hey, we'll just put the first female kicker on to get all this good social justice PR, but it resulted in the players actually crying. So this is the story from the Daily Caller. They say, Vanderbilt players were apparently emotional during Sarah Fuller's kick against Missouri. Okay, maybe they were crying with tears of joy,
so
right?
Happy.
They were just crying watching this historic moment.
Sure.
During the 41-0 blowout loss, Fuller became the first woman to play in a major college football game. When she kicked the start of the second half, the ball went a staggering 30 yards. There were some people on the sideline tearing up, quarterback Mike Wright said during a Saturday morning college game day segment on Fuller's kick. As hard as that might be to believe, I can promise that I'm not making this up. You can watch the video below. It used to be an insult, yada, yada. When is this nonsense going to end, they say? This is nothing more than a PR stunt, which didn't save Derek Mason's job. And now we're out here talking about players crying. Are you kidding me? This can't possibly be real. From the way people talk about Fuller's kick, you'd think she was the first woman to walk on the moon. So it sounds like they're actually saying they were crying tears of joy, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly silly.
Yes.
And patronizing.
Yes.
And I mean, any meaningful.
I don't know. I mean, there's record low testosterone out there, and it keeps going down. So.
Remember the Try Guys from BuzzFeed?
Yes.
Remember that segment?
Gosh.
They got
you know what-
testosterone tested.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there were 4 guys at BuzzFeed, and they got their T levels tested, and they were all as like 80-year-old men.
I could have told you
Levels.
that just looking at him, though.
I mean,
to be fair.
Super low, and it's kind of crazy. I wonder, is there like, what's going on?
There's been a
You know?
progressive decline in testosterone that's been tested
Why, Luke?
throughout the decades. There's many theories out there. There's many different explanations. Some people are talking about microplastics. Some people are talking about poor diet. Some people are talking about
Birth control in the water.
birth control in the water, which is another thing. Some people are talking about the frogs
Right.
deciding to change their
The
orientation.
atrazine.
Turn the freaking frogs
Yes,
gay.
I didn't want to say that, but yes, that's exactly what's been happening. So
Is
there's
that gonna
many
hurt you?
different.
Is that going to D-rank you?
I don't know, probably.
Maybe, I don't know.
They're gonna
It's worth
think it was actually Alex Jones. They're gonna be like, "We caught it."
It did
Somebody.
sound just like Alex.
No, I'm just doing an impersonation.
But this is a serious issue because reproductivity of human beings is going down dramatically. So people.
well. So what does that have to do with the kick in the football
Well, we just
game?
made a comment about the testosterone issue, and maybe
Oh.
they were crying for real
Yeah,
because
I
they
don't
know. No, I
were
think-
emotional.
When I read that, I thought they were crying because like their careers are now destroyed.
Yeah.
They're now losers on a losing team because of this PR stunt to put a woman on the team.
They lost 41 to
Do you
0.
guys know?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you're not familiar with this. Like, there was some Chicago White Sox owner who had his team like send out a 6-year-old or something to bat in a baseball game.
Really?
He walked because the small strike zone.
Is that real?
That's real. Like, look at it. I think it's Eddie Geidel, Gaedel.
I'm
I
really
think that's
curious
right. But
now.
like, I know the owner is Bill Veck. See if I got the name right.
That's amazing.
He was 6
I
years
always
old.
find that things like
Eddie
that kind
Geidel.
of
I got
patronizing.
look at that, man. My memory's good. Damn.
He was the world's smallest player. He was 5'6"
cute.
inches.
No. That's Rizzuto. Click on the link.
Oh.
This Eddie Geidel.
Yeah, there he is.
Oh wow, look at that.
That's
I
real.
love it.
That's real. That happened.
Oh wow, but he wasn't 6 years old. Is that,
I'm not sure how old he was when he played.
He's just a little person.
No. He was a child.
He was a child.
He was a child.
He gained recognition in the second game of the St. Louis
3'7"
Browns doubleheader,
inches.
weighing 60 pounds and standing at 3'7". He became the shortest player in history of the major leagues.
Oh no, you're right. I guess you're right. He was actually.
He looks like a child.
Yeah.
Smart play though.
Curious.
Smart play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tiny strike zone, hard to get that. And he walks.
Yeah. He walks. So okay,
So-
that's what I didn't remember correctly.
So
but
what
yeah,
what is the strategic advantage of having a female kicker?
there isn't one, but I guess
There's not.
I was-
BuzzFeed's gonna like you.
I
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
thinking
right.
it's like 50 years ago people recognized this sort of thing as like a ridiculous stunt, and it's like
Well, I'm gonna tell you. The reason I want to talk about this is because I said I think like 3 years ago, when like a lot of video game and movie stuff was happening, I said it's only a matter of time before they just change the rules to mandate women in Major League Sports. Like, why not? The rules are arbitrary, right? We could raise the basketball nets 5 feet. We just agree to do it. Then no more dunking or something. Right? People might still be able to dunk, I guess, but we could just say, okay, new rule change. So what if right now everyone just said, okay, new rule change. Players have to be half women, half men. Why not?
well.
Is the
then
NBA
you-
gonna
then
be
you'd
diverse?
Then you
Why
just
not?
see a
Yeah.
bunch of. I mean, there would be a huge market for trans women.
Yep.
That's what happened.
Well, I said back then
There
that
is.
it's only a matter of time before there are diversity demands in Major League Sports. If the rules can be changed by people, then there's no reason they can't have a rule saying the easiest way to get women in Major League Sports is just to mandate that they're there. It's the same as any diversity quota. It's not about your merit. It's about making sure there's representation in the game, right? There
I mean,
you go.
I would have said Democrats wouldn't do that, but they've done a lot of crazy things in
Yes.
the past few years. So
But this already happens in mainstream society. In the corporate world, this already
Exactly.
exists.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't it exist in the NBA?
And I think it's going to. It's
Yeah.
absolutely
No,
going to.
Dude, they'll get
They're-
their bones broken.
Well,
Perhaps you're a bigot, Ian.
No, I'm talking about physiology. You gotta be
that
be
doesn't exist
every
anymore.
compassionate.
Look,
Will,
like-
can you hear this bigot? Everyone knows there's no difference
I'm just
all.
struck by the fact that he's not recognizing the impact of discourse on physiology.
Yeah. There's,
Like,
there's
That's
an
true.
obvious difference.
We can talk people to be the same.
That's right. it's
Well,
true.
no. But think about this. There's no rule stopping women from playing in any major league sport. They just don't
Never has been.
win when they try out. They she kicked 30 yards. She didn't kick 70. So I looked up. I don't know anything about football, and they said a good kick is 70 yards.
She might have been kicking onside though because they were down so far.
was that the case?
Yeah,
Well,
some
if
people
they're down 25 points at the beginning of the second half, and she might kick an onside kick, that might be
and some people said it was a squib kick intentionally,
which is an onside. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
she might be a great kicker.
Yeah.
For a woman.
But
Just for
the
a
point I'm making
football
is
player.
the
How
point I'm
dare
making
you.
is look, we make up the rules of the game. Right now, the rules are the best of the best are chosen by the managers and the owners for who's going to be on the team. We could
Meritocracy.
simply just say, yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
question,
Diversity over meritocracy.
As men are losing testosterone, are women getting more beastly?
I don't know.
Well, I don't know about naturally. Like men are naturally losing testosterone.
Yeah, it's
like
kinda
the
weird.
BuzzFeed guys are a good example of that. But I think that might be because they're not exercising.
Yeah.
It's really, look, guys used to have to go and chop lumber.
True.
Now they sit at their desks and eat Doritos and drink Mountain Dew. You
Yeah,
know, and
COVID
they-
was not good for my waistline. That's for sure.
yeah, nobody's. But maybe with more women getting in sports and things like that, maybe we'll see an increase over time. But look, the point I'm saying is, you mentioned in corporations we already have the diversity quotas. You look at California now; they passed that law where they got a what is it,
Mandatory, yeah.
mandatory board member must be like female or
Yep.
minority or whatever. Why not in Major League Sports? And I'm not saying why not in the sense of I'm advocating for it. I'm saying why wouldn't they do it?
They will
It's
be
gonna
doing
happen.
it, and you're calling it out, and we're going to see in a few months, maybe even a few years, just these kind of
No more
patronizing
dunking.
representation of here we are.
It's like
we're all
sarcastic
equal,
ball. Remember,
we're all
you-
the same. Everyone gets an
I
award.
don't know. I mean, you might end up. It might be a bridge too far, right? Like you get the sense that people were able to do a lot of things. Like I want you to think about this. Like I wonder how long the mass kneeling would have lasted in a world where the crowds were still at the arenas, right after George Floyd. There's a sense where they could get away with it because there was no audience to boo. I wonder how long people would do that if there was systematic booing.
Well, look what happened
know.
to the NBA and their record low ratings with them politicizing this and literally putting Black Lives Matter on the basketball court.
And then they polled people. It was a Hill Harris X, and they found that most people said, "I can't stand the politics,"
yeah.
so they're not watching anymore.
Well, I watched one game, and it was just during the timeouts, during the interviews, any kind of patronizing, any kind of virtual signal they could put out, they put out there as much as they could. So what you're saying, I think, is going to come true. It's only going to be a matter of time. And it's trendy. It's cool, Will. You got to get with the times.
Yeah, that's why I'm a conservative.
All right, so you don't have to do that.
It's going to come down to clapter, right? What we're going to see is people are going to be watching sports, and they're not going to care about touchdowns or scores. They're going to care about representation of people. So it's like that episode of South Park where they had Sarcastable, where football was too rough. So then it turned into a game of tag, and then there was like them chasing balloons around and wearing bras. And it was because Randy was like, oh, okay, fine. Like, it's too rough. Why don't we just have the kids chase balloons instead, I guess? And they're like,
yeah.
okay, that's a good idea. Oh, okay, then why not have them wear bras while they do it? And they're like, okay, let's do it. And they did it. And the game became just ridiculous nonsense. And then they didn't realize, like, they were like, I don't know if I'm being sarcastic anymore. Nothing makes sense. Everything's broken. But I think that's where we're gonna get to. We're gonna start seeing a bunch of these, political.
If you had like a force-fed men and women on a football field together, you'd eventually get like a group of rogue dudes that are huge and beast that would just go start their own league.
I think you know what I was reading that we should just let everybody take whatever drugs they want.
Well,
in
I'm
terms
into
of
that.
performance enhancement.
No, I'm just kidding.
And just who was it? Joe Rogan talking about this? Somebody was talking about it,
Probably.
like, where they were like, just let everybody take whatever drugs they want, and then you'll have gigantic monsters just running on the field,
Like steroids.
Yeah, just everything. Just their heart rate's like 250 resting, and they're like running, 30 miles an hour. Just the craziest all out.
Barry Bonds was roided out. A lot of athletes have been seriously steroided out, and we just didn't know about it. throughout
Yeah.
history.
So let's roll it. Okay, let's do super chats.
Yes.
Super chats. All right. If you haven't already, smash the like button, hit the notification bell, subscribe. We do the show Monday through Friday live at 8 p.m., but let's read what y'all have to say. Bill Ray says, Louisiana just joined Texas lawsuit with SCOTUS. More states are said to follow. Is that? Can you Google
Yes,
that?
I saw
Yeah,
that
that's
article
That's true.
out there as well.
It's true. Don't think it'll matter. Sorry.
Really?
I hate to be like the black pill on this, but it's really going to be a question.
Stop
of-
raining on our parade, Will.
I know.
No, continue. It's
Except
smart.
they're
Like-
corporate Chinese overlords.
I mean, the question from the Supreme Court's perspective is not how many states agree that we should sue here, but like, do we want? I mean, think about it from their perspective. Right now, there are election contests in states, and this litigation is handled elsewhere. Do they really want to be the court of first resort for states that are
but
upset about election results?
What
No.
if they have secretly their own self-preservation at heart? They know that the court will get packed and they'll lose all their legitimacy.
I mean,
They'll become a legislative body, and then eventually they'll say, we vote for the Supreme Court justices.
I just don't think they're. I've been around law enough to see when the Supreme Court decides they don't want to hear cases and they don't have to, they end up not. I mean, that said, I could be wrong here because there's 3 justices who might end up agreeing with Alito and Thomas. that we haven't heard from on the issue of whether or not they think it's actually mandatory for them to take these cases.
Wait, Alito and Thomas do think it's mandatory?
Yeah, Alito and Thomas think it's mandatory, but for a long time the majority has said it's discretionary, and I mean that's a practical.
So you
thing
would
too.
you so you have Alito and Thomas if potentially Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, then
And
you
Gorsuch,
would need so potentially Gorsuch.
possible. I just doubtful.
The three, we don't know their opinions, and if they do agree.
Yeah, but I mean, if they agree, there's a lot of reasons for them to not want to agree because they've just invited a whole.
But come
slew
on,
of
come
litigation
on,
they don't
Will. Don't you think that Clarence Thomas has waited 30 years for his revenge against Joe Biden? That's what the meme
I mean,
said.
I bet he is very tempted. I bet he is.
No,
very
you know
tempted.
what? You know that meme where you've seen the meme where Clarence Thomas's eyes are glowing and it says, "I've been waiting 30 years for this moment, Mr. Biden," or whatever.
Right.
I was like, I think Clarence Thomas is of sound mind and integrity and maturity that he would not have that. He doesn't. These are some of the most people of highest integrity and merit. I don't see them being like, I have a personal grudge to fulfill and I've been waiting 30 years and I'm going to use the court to get it. That doesn't sound like.
That's not how it works. That's not how they want to do their jobs.
Maybe though. I mean, I saw that look on Kavanaugh's face, and remember what he said. He said, what did he say? Something about them getting what they deserve or something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's Kamala Harris. And she
in
was
a
one of the
moment
people.
anger, but I mean, there's just an ethos to judging that a lot of these judges have, which is they take pride in applying the law as written and doing it better than other people and in a more fair way. It's almost like law is it's almost like a kind of game or puzzle that you're trying to and the legal problems or puzzles you're trying to elegantly solve, and it's hard to escape from that to do something so radical.
William Martinez says, according to Trump lawyer Jenna Ellis, it isn't rejected. They only rejected the emergency injunction relief.
Right.
That's true. We talked about that. Basically, the idea is if they don't agree with the injunction now, then what relief could they possibly give if the lawsuit can't do anything anymore?
There's a reason they filed the emergency injunctive relief. It's important. The fact that you had unanimous denial of that without a dissent is it's just a really bad side for the underlying litigation. And I think that in a world where they really did think that the Pennsylvania plaintiffs would prevail, they would be inclined to grant that relief.
So these are super chats from a while ago. Ziggy says lawsuit was dismissed because of Texas lawsuit. Also, 7 more states just joined Texas lawsuit.
I haven't seen 7 more
I haven't seen
states.
7.
I have. Okay. I have seen Arkansas, Alabama, and Louisiana who are supporting Texas. This is from 3 hours ago.
Really?
So I don't know. There might be even more since then.
Are we going to get the second Civil War here?
That's the most recent thing I saw.
People, I think, again, is not to put cold water on it. I feel like I'm a little
Bring
bit
it on,
of a broken
Will.
record.
We can handle it.
But it's like the idea that the Supreme Court would dismiss one case in order because Texas filed a lawsuit that is a type of lawsuit that is very narrowly circumscribed to these like water rights type cases.
A lot of people are saying 7 other states just joined.
Let me see what else I can find.
Yeah, I am not optimistic. That said, again, like I do say that I'm more optimistic about this than I have been about other things, just because instead of having like 6 or 7 independent procedural bars to hearing the case, there's just this one thing, and so if the court gets over this one thing, they could hear it.
I think you're just a negative Nancy, Will, and you just hate Trump.
I'm so tired of being told that. It's just everybody's like. Maybe I should just
Trump.
put my brain in a bowl of warm water and forget for the next
great.
weeks.
Well,
No,
wanna do that
it is
too.
funny though, because it's like when I'm reading legal analysis on Twitter, the right wing opinions are always like, here's why Trump is going to win, and the left is always why this is why Trump's going to lose.
Yeah.
And then there's a tendency so far for Trump only had a few lawsuits. And then you had a bunch of other lawsuits from other people. The left, these leftist legal opinions are always like, oh, that's Trump down 40 now. And it's like, Trump didn't actually file all those lawsuits. Like, he can't control those people. So they're really trying to ham it up. But then in certain, you get the point, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you can't help like when somebody files a lawsuit that's terrible and it gets thrown out on jurisdictional grounds.
Yep.
Like,
Mike Hunt, I almost read it. You're going to get me in trouble. Mr. Hunt, first name Mike, says, watch Viva Frey's video on the Texas lawsuit. We will win. Well, I don't know. Viva Frey, he's a famous.
I respect Viva Frey.
But he's Canadian, isn't he?
Quick.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think like, I tried to do my reading on this, and like when I first read the lawsuit.
Will, just
Yeah,
put that negative feeling in the back of your mind and lie so you can get more followers on Twitter.
Yes.
Does that work?
Yes, of
I
course
don't
it
know.
does.
That's what Twitter is.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
All you got to
That's
do
their
is
code
be
of
like,
conduct.
if you came out and said, Hi, I'm a respectable lawyer and I run a publication, and my clear legal analysis suggests that Donald Trump is guaranteed victory, you'd gain a bunch of
Yeah,
followers.
they'll probably get like 10,000 retweets.
Yeah, man.
Harmeet Dillon tweeted out from, Lynn Wood said that Raffensperger and Kemp are going to prison or whatever, and she said this is bat S. It's not going to happen. She lost followers, and she's like, good.
Yeah.
Like
I
if
feel
you
that
want
way
if
too,
you want a
yeah.
lawyer to lie
like
to you,
her.
go follow them. Don't follow me. And I'm like,
Right.
exactly.
Like that's, I mean, it's culling the weak.
She's great. Yeah, absolutely.
The commander says a war against China won't be hopeless. Look up Binkov's battleground episodes of Taiwan versus China. The Marines are currently training new missile crews and putting them in ships in reserve to contain them to the China Sea and counter their island building. Interesting.
Yeah, they're building islands,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
floating islands.
Yep. Stephen Krashevsky says, if you want an example of what SCOTUS will look like once Dems are done with it, look at the PA Supreme Court. Political, partisan, corrupt.
That's correct. Good. That's a good chat.
Yeah. And then what? Do we just roll over and give up now? There's
Yeah.
no this is it, right?
I mean,
If they pack the courts and they give statehood to DC, which makes no sense. Puerto Rico I can understand. And then all of a sudden Republicans never win elections. And,
Yeah.
and when they do, they never win any of their votes, and it's extreme single party rule. And then we become California. Next thing we know, they're trying to repeal the Civil Rights Act.
yeah, because it allows for too much equality.
Yeah, they tried. Archimagirius says, in PA, if you buy a gun, you can select non-binary for gender on the application. WTF? Identify as a fit 145-pound non-binary with no felonies. Yeah, you can. What?
See,
Yeah.
people, I have a random bit on this. People seem to think that everybody said, gender is not like in the current thing is not a new, it's a new word. Before 1960s, gender only referred to how it was used in languages. And then the 1960s, people realized, hey, we want a word that is distinct from like biological sex to refer to sort of archetypes of behavior among
Right.
males and females. So let's call it gender and let's make it that thing. And then 30 years later, that's like, hey, did you know that gender is a social construction? I'm like, yes, that's why it was invented.
Right.
I
But
get
now,
that.
but now they're saying sex is a social construct.
That's how they get.
So I put out a tweet that was meant to be just like general support for Elliot Page.
Mm-hmm.
Elliot Page is female, but and there are people who feel a certain way and ask that you respect them. I have no problem giving someone respect when they've earned it. And I think Elliot Page is cool, so I'm totally cool with
Sure, I mean, and there's
But-
also like a
but-
basic kindness.
but here's the
like
thing.
Call people what they want to be called. I guess
saying Elliot Page is female is transphobic, and people were like reporting me like crazy and quote tweeting saying, why won't Twitter ban him? Why won't Twitter ban him? Because I said a basic fact with respect.
Right.
The point I was making was that even though Elliot Page is a female, Elliot Page is asking for respect, and I think Elliot is cool, so I'll grant that respect. I have no problem there. I think this is great. It's fine. Do your thing. The problem is the left wants you to think that biological sex is now a social construct, which it's not.
No, it is not.
So there is a basic fact about this, but I'm not trying to be mean. Like I'm trying to make the point that we can still respect someone if they you're not guaranteed respect. No one has to give you respect, but people can choose to.
Right. There's a difference between kindness and mandatory thought control.
Yep.
Right. I think that I'm perfectly happy to be kind and use people's names the way they want them used. But when you start saying, "Oh, we should mandate pronoun usage," I mean, now you're mandating how I talk about you when you're not here, right? That's another thing about pronouns. So when I talk to you, I don't use your gender or your sex. When I talk to you,
A lot of
it's
people are
he
bringing
or
up.
him.
Jay of Legend says 7 more states joined Texas: Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi, South Carolina, South Dakota. 8 states in total now. But certainly at a certain point, there's a constitutional crisis, right?
It sounds like.
I mean,
it's
it strikes me as just like a PR exercise. States file amicus briefs all the time supporting litigation.
And is that what it is?
Yeah, and I mean, it's like that's why, I mean, and so this isn't like an amicus brief. This is like, oh well, apparently under this theory, states can sue other states if they don't enforce their election laws properly.
I mean, it
But
makes sense.
It makes sense, but then you also kind of see like, shouldn't this be like an amicus brief in a case where that is not like straight to the Supreme Court, and instead, there's like election contest procedures.
They waited till the very last day for the safe harbor deadline too. Are they going to get the Supreme Court? Might just be like,
I mean, there was one thing I thought the briefing was generally not bad. There were a couple things I noticed. One thing, and this is more inside baseball, the Texas Solicitor General was not in the brief, and that's not a good sign.
yeah. People were saying that he wouldn't sign off on it because he doesn't believe in it.
Yeah, and I mean that's wrong. So the Solicitor General of any state is the person who handles all their appellate litigation, Supreme Court stuff, and the appellate litigation in their own state. And they're usually a person who is like often a former Supreme Court clerk, et cetera, and they're in charge of that. And if they're not willing to sign on, it's like That's not a good sign.
But I'm saying, after everything we've seen with the conflict, the chaos, the fighting, the street battles, the tensions reaching the Supreme Court, now you have a bunch of states suing other states. Whether or not these states actually mean it, the regular people are seeing this, and Trump supporters are agreeing with it. And we're being pushed towards the most extreme outcome.
That's true.
States lining up against other states.
That didn't work out well the first time it happened. 5% of the population died. I don't want that to happen again.
I would argue that it didn't work out well in that capacity, but it actually worked out very, very well. Slavery was ended.
I agree that it's a good thing that slavery ended. That seems like the most uncontroversial thing I could ever say.
I think it was a good thing that slavery was.
I'm on the side of that was an idea. That was a good idea. We should have done that.
No, but think about the potential outcomes of where we're at now. If it is true that we are slowly being eroded by just feckless politicians who are selling us out for over a long time, then regaining control in some capacity, there's a net positive. There's nothing as clearly as moral as slavery in this instance, however.
Yeah.
I think the threat of a foreign power is serious, but Civil War, brought about the end of slavery, and that's just
at the end of the day, I think the other states realize that it's an obvious PR exercise to sign on to a lawsuit that their constituents want them to sign on to.
I understand that, but think about what that means to the regular people of their state. How many people do you think started polishing their guns when they heard 8 states are now supporting the suit?
Yeah, no, that's something to worry about, and also probably a reason that they would deny cert again, right? That they would deny motion. They'd be like, we don't want this. We don't want a massive state-on-state battle when you're talking about.
I think that's what they would create. If 8 states are saying we demand to be heard and the Supreme Court says no, then regular people are going to say, are you kidding me? If 8 states can't get listened to in the federal courts, and we've seen the evidence, and they won't give us the time of day, their heads are going to explode.
Yeah, no, that's
I think the smartest thing would be the Supreme Court actually hearing it and then ruling against it on some, in some capacity.
I don't know. Good question. Denying
8 states is going to make people blow up.
Yeah, no, I didn't really think about that angle of it. That makes sense. I mean, I still think ultimately the Supreme Court's gonna pass, but
I wouldn't be surprised. The injunctive relief was 9-0. It was unanimous. They said no to injunctive relief.
I mean, that's not the first time, right? The Third Circuit was.
People have commented. They're saying the reason they did that is because Texas lawsuits is bigger and it's going to accomplish the same thing.
I mean, this is just more 4D chess thinking, right? Oh, this loss is actually what we want. No, we don't want to lose. We're losing.
Well,
is
no,
bad.
but does that make sense that the Supreme Court would say we're already we have a bigger case that's going to have?
I mean, they would have just gotten the filing by the time they were. I mean, they would have finalized this decision in the last few days.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have known about this filing. They would have just gotten the filing. They barely reviewed the briefing, have not reviewed any opposition briefing or even thought about it. I mean,
I think the fact that this many states have lined up is signaling to the people of this country that the divisions are as extreme as they could possibly be.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. I mean, the divisions are horrible.
But I think that leads to some, really bad scenarios in the next few years.
I hope not. I hope you're wrong.
V City says, related to your story earlier, do you remember in 1996, the DNC and Clintons got busted illegally accepting contributions? The Chinese billionaire doing that got arrested in 2015 for illegally bringing $4.5 million into the U.S. That was the John Ash case. Interesting. Big Rig says, what is the definition of a reasonable amount of time in the context of the PA lawsuit?
I mean, in the PA lawsuit, that would relate to latches. I mean, and that would be, it's a question of whether or not there was undue delay, and that will differ based on that's under the circumstances. There's a lot of cases in law where there's not an exact technical term definition, and then it's did it cause prejudice to the opposing party? Rilo
704 says he wins in court or revolution it is. That's what everyone around me in North Carolina is thinking, as seen by massive gun ammo sales. No one will tolerate an agent of China as POTUS. I have a DD-214 and I will readily die for America. Do you see what the Arizona GOP said? Are you ready to die for your country or whatever?
I mean, I'll be actually a little bit more forceful there. I think all that talk is too much. I think.
I agree. Yeah, but look, I'm at a point where I'm like, we see what's going on with the Chinese infiltration and this guy bragging about Biden being in the back pocket. We've seen the story. We've seen the laptop. We've seen the emails. We know about the flight on Air Force 2. We know all that's happening. It's not about what I think or what you think or anyone in this room thinks. It's about what regular people have decided a long time ago.
Sure. I mean, and hopefully it's the same sort of talk that was the Democrats are pushing that Trump was a Russian agent for a long time. This seems like kind of the analog of that. I don't think Democrats mean, there were anarchist Democrats, but I don't know that Democrats were talking about a complete revolution in the streets. So they were talking about resistance obnoxiously. I don't know.
Dedicated says, what does Ian think
About what?
about what we're talking about?
I think that we need a cultural cohesion, and it's not going to come through politics. That we need to focus on our art, make some sweet songs, and keep doing shows like this.
good sir.
Yeah.
That's
Good
why
point.
we're doing the vlog. We wanna have fun with lasers and 3D printers, so we can create something positive. You know, a lot of what we talk about, it's like all negative, like all these bad things, all these bad things.
I don't like talking about how my side is going to lose.
Yeah,
in
that
court.
sucks, right?
It's not fun. It's not my favorite thing to do.
Or, a civil war. And,
you know, it was more
right. We want to build a laser and
I was having
shoot
so
a teddy
much,
bear with it.
I was having so much fun when we were talking about like the National Emergency Declaration. I got to go on, everybody who didn't agree with me, but I was like, no, this will work. Here's the statute. Here's the law. Here's why what Trump's doing is going to work. Super stoked to talk about that. Really not a fan of talking about how Trump's not going to win these election challenges.
Yep.
It sucks.
But outside of just politics in general, everything's always about some crisis or some problem.
Yeah.
Even if you're talking about winning, you're talking about a fight. So that's why I'm like, we got to do a vlog. We got to do. We're buying farmland. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff here. We're also going to get a big farm, and we're going to do crazy stuff there. We're going to build like dome houses. That was Luke's idea, and we can make videos about just doing positive things, teaching people how to be responsible for themselves, and having fun while we do it. Because there's got to be a balance.
Yeah.
We can't just talk every night about how bad everything is.
Are you optimistic about anything?
I mean, I'm optimistic about. I think I'm honestly optimistic about like how life is going for me personally in general. I'm still reading a lot of books. I got Human Events is doing well. I mean, things are going well personally.
Cool.
Like
There you go.
I read a 1,000-page book on the Battle of Midway recently. I enjoyed
Whoa.
that. Yeah.
Right on. Jonathan Trudeau says, I have a question. Can we have the National Guard watch over the poll counters to make sure everyone plays by the rules? And if you don't, then you get arrested. And then they stay and watch the ballots till everything is counted.
I mean, we should have a ballot system that no one questions. Like that should be the end goal. I don't know. I don't
Right.
realize why people don't think of that. I mean, other countries look at our ballot system and are like, that's
Are you insane?
stupid.
Yes.
Like we should have a ballot system that's beyond question. That should be the goal, because in a world, especially in a world we're so polarized. I remember tweeting something along the lines of, "Isn't it a wonderful time to be experimenting with?"
It's entirely possible that throughout the show we are talking about nonsense because people were getting the news while we weren't. But someone says SCOTUS has voted 6-3 to hear the Texas lawsuit. Is that true?
No, I don't think
no.
so.
I haven't seen that yet.
I saw. I think
I haven't seen it.
I'm pretty sure that it was just docketed.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like last night or whatever.
No, and I mean the lawsuit was filed this morning, I think. But it was docketed. It was on the Supreme Court's docket, and people were out there saying, "Oh, they've agreed to hear it." I'm like, "No, they just docketed it." Which is just an acknowledgement that it was properly filed procedurally.
Trevor Klein says, so this is it. The free world has lost. The future is red. If Biden becomes president, you guys won't have a true election. Canada is already effed. I had hoped in you guys. Now it does not. Now it does look long night.
I'm not that depressed, especially if we hold the Senate. Incumbent presidents generally do worse in their first congressional midterm, and Biden is also going to be 81 in 2024, and it's not like cognitive decline reverses. So
Lex Murley says, I'm laughing so hard I'm crying. Don't ever fix Ian's mic. It is his mic now. People are saying that your mic is echoing.
Yes.
And it's probably
That's what they
it sounds
said.
super low. I don't know.
Why is it echoing? Maybe the camera's audio is actually being
I
picked
think
up.
that might be it.
God.
And there's nothing I could do about it. the
Welcome
whole
to
time.
my world.
Sorry,
Yeah.
everyone.
somebody said, "Lock the door so we can't come back." That wasn't very nice.
I'm not your
really
buddy
mean.
guy says, dark times lie ahead of us, and there will be a time when we must choose between what's easy and what is right. Albus Dumbledore.
Has
right.
anybody read a book other than Harry Potter?
To be fair, that is a good
Wait,
quote.
hold on. There are other books?
Oh,
Yes.
Huh.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I love that. It's like millennials need to learn how to read books because they only ever read Harry Potter.
it's replaced the Bible as like a sense of,
Yeah.
a common cultural touchstone about
Seriously.
things.
Well,
Weird.
it's kind of annoying to me because I've actually read the Harry Potter books and there are some good lines like that one. There are some very hopeful and inspiring lines. No one ever uses those. They only use the dark ones and the really super resisty ones.
Kaylin R says, I put $300 on Trump to win. Howley report of major voter fraud arrests in Texas. Biden Ukraine video on YouTube. Kill chain video on HBO shows exactly how voter fraud is accomplished. Kemp is in it for sitting U.S. And for sitting U.S. senators.
Well, there's always somebody on the other side of the bet.
Yep. Talbot Link says, there's people saying Trump supporters should be shaved like the French ladies that supported the Nazis. With how many protesters did that to themselves, I foresee a dark twist on Benny Hill style stuff going down. Yep. Tyler Danielson says, if China runs the one world government, the Galactic Federation will never let us in. Or they will, because they're like the Borg, and they're extreme authoritarians who want just people to be under control, right?
There's actually a petition on change.org right now to label the Galactic Federation as a racist organization for the exclusion of Earth. That's happening right now. Getting a lot of signatures.
Nice.
Wouldn't it be speciesist and not racist?
Yeah, I don't know what that would be.
Okay, so is this real? EW says SCOTUS just gave Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia until December 10th at 3 p.m. to respond to the Texas lawsuit.
I did see that, but that's not
Okay.
exactly new.
That could be. I mean, that's obviously something where they would. And again, they're not responding to the Texas lawsuit. They're responding
Right.
to the motion for leave to file.
And so, like what we saw with Pennsylvania, they ordered Pennsylvania to respond. Pennsylvania did, and then they said unanimously
You lose.
reject injunctive relief. Yeah.
Like that's also happened a lot where, I mean, everybody's been really excited about like the motions they've granted are like the motions for expedited review. And they've been like, we won a victory. We won the right to have our case dismissed really soon as opposed to later on. Like,
Is it possible that what's going on is everyone's kind of agreed we've got to string the Trump supporters along just enough so that they run out of steam? Because on election night, they're all riled up, right?
yeah.
And if Biden won outright, people would explode immediately. But drag it out as long as possible, get their hopes up and then bring them down, and hopes up and then bring them down, and slowly get them to the point where they lost.
I mean,
Otherwise, they go nuts.
I mean, maybe that's the way it'll work, right? Maybe you'll just have like, I mean, maybe we'll just keep losing these cases, and there you go.
Shooter 13 says, "May your chains sit lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were ever our
Good quote.
forget that you were our countrymen."
Good quote.
Wow.
Who's that?
I forget. I think it's Samuel Adams. Hold on, let me look it up for us.
Somebody says.
Jay says, "Will looks like he's going to cry if Trump wins." Can you
Oh,
comment
man.
on JRE with Jack Dorsey?
It's had
was
the
Jack
other way.
was Jack being deceitful, seeing now all the recent censorship? What was Jack back on Joe Rogan? No, I didn't see it. Was that what happened? Was that today?
Not that I've seen.
I can comment on Jack with Joe with Jack Dorsey when I was on it, but that was like
I think
almost
that's
2
to
years
what
ago
they're
now.
referring.
Yeah.
Is that what they're referring to?
Yeah. Can I read this quote real fast?
Oh, I see it. Yeah. What quote?
It is from Sam Adams. It says, "If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsel or arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may your posterity forget that you are our countrymen."
We have two comments. Jerome Morrow says, "I used to like Ian, but now that he's demonically possessed, I don't know." And M. Pow in chat said, "Ian is in his echo chamber in his safe space."
Oh my!
We got to fix that.
We'll look at that after.
Because we don't hear it because the input is on the camera. If
Yeah,
it's
it
not
sounds
going
great.
into the mixer.
Yeah, sounds fine.
It's actually really simple. You just flick the sound off on the camera.
Okay.
Want me to do that now?
Yeah, I mean
I don't
we're
wanna
a
mess
couple
with
minutes
it.
out from all going to bed, so we'll get it sorted.
I like demons, by the way.
I was going to say, somebody
What?
said he sounded like God.
We can go into it later.
Like God.
Yeah, like the voice of God.
He's got the
I was
crystal
like,
ball.
I don't think Ian would mind that.
Actually, the mics are all correct. We hear Ian. He sounds
he
reverberating.
I hear you
this
fine.
is what I've always been like.
No, that what everyone's hearing, that's actually Ian's voice.
Yeah.
It's not technical glitch
I
at
have
all.
vibrato.
JJ says the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Thomas Jefferson. Eli Ben says, "I bet $10,000 on Predict It for Trump to win. Still confident I will make bank."
I hope you make all that money, Eli. I just don't think you will.
Yeah. And would you say that you hope you lose your money and he makes his money?
I hope I lose my money. Like I hope I'm wrong, but I'm also like, I'm not going to make a public prediction without putting a bet on it like this one, especially when everybody's disagreeing with me. So
I think that's fair.
Donnie Mason says the left was absolutely talking revolution in the streets. What else would you call no justice, no peace, defunding the police and nationwide riots? Well, I'm not so sure about that, but I remember when they were chanting revolution, nothing less. I'm pretty sure that implied they wanted revolution.
right, I was trying to distinguish between like the Antifa lefties and the sort of Russia truthers who were not really rioting in the streets.
Yeah,
like,
the
they
Russia truthers.
In a weird way, it was like a more bizarre theory. Like at least like the sort of Antifa revolution in the streets, like there's a coherence to it. The theory that our billionaire real estate magnate turned president was really a secret Russian nation.
Yes.
Was
That was
pretty
a
preposterous,
fun
man.
idea because like living in a movie, but
Yeah.
life is more boring than that.
Apparently
Let's
not.
see. Jacob Jones says, Gandalf, quote, to Frodo, lamenting bad times, quote, "So do I, and so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what we do with this time that is given us."
That's great.
There you go.
True.
Well, I think we're a little bit over, but we'll wrap up there. Make sure you guys hit that like button, subscribe, notification bells. We'll be back tomorrow. Will, thanks so much for hanging out. You want to mention your website and
humanevents.com. Read our news and follow me on Twitter and Periscope at Will Chamberlain, where I regularly Periscope, and I'm doing a lot of the legal Periscopes as legal news happens. Over the
Will
next few days.
Chamberlain.
Yes.
You realize the first time I was introduced to you, someone said your name was Will Chamberlain. I was like, wait, isn't that like a soccer player? It's like, what Wilt Chamberlain?
Yeah. No,
Yes.
it's not the first time I've
Right, I imagine. It's like very. I was
comparison.
like, that name sounds familiar.
Wilt the Stilt, they
Yeah,
called
Wilt.
him. Super tall basketball player.
Basketball player. There you
Wilt
go.
the Stilt Chamberlain.
All right. Well, make sure you follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Parler at Timcast. Check out my other channels, youtube.com/Timcast and youtube.com/Timcast News. Again, we're live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, and don't forget to follow Luke Rudkowski. He's chilling here.
Oh,
You can find me on youtube.com/wearechange, and hope to see you there.
And of course, we got Ian, who is now the demonic monster.
Hello.
Godly voice of God.
You don't have to do that.
Oh, I don't have to.
You're
It's gonna
already
inform me.
reverberating.
Yeah, follow me at Ian Crossland. Hit me up. Everywhere.
And of course, you got Sour Patch Lids over on the production station.
Yes, I've been pushing
Thank
the
you so
buttons all
much.
wrong tonight. You guys sound very similar. You guys are basically brothers from different mothers. I'm sorry about that.
Who?
Sour Patch Lids. Luke and Will, you sound very similar, your voices. So, yeah, it's been difficult.
Interesting.
Anyway, here's Tim.
Thanks for hanging out, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m., and we will see you all then.
Bye, guys.